Chapter 107. The whistle spread far and wide in the wind and snow. Hearing Xiao Xian's whistle, some people were still confused. They didn't understand what Xiao Xian was trying to do. Others thought of something and their expressions changed. They looked up at the sky. Ah! Yang Guang and his sister shouted in surprise. They already knew what Xiao Xian was trying to do. They opened their eyes wide and looked at the sky. Even when the snow fell into their eyes, they just wiped it away hurriedly. After that, they continued staring, afraid that they would miss something. What's going on? Meng turned his head and asked the people behind him. That eagle. Meng looked in the direction that the other person was pointing at and looked at a certain spot in the sky. A small black dot appeared in the sky. Soon, the dot became bigger and bigger. Even the falling snow couldn't cover its figure as it flew over. Cha-cha! It's cha-cha! Yang Guang and his sister were so happy that they wanted to jump a few times. Because they knew Xiao Xian, they knew a little about cha-cha. The others all had their own thoughts. To many people in the tribe, cha-cha was just like Caesar. They only had the permission of the shaman to move around in the tribe. Many people even thought that such prey had lost its sharpness in the forest. They didn't care about it. Even without the permission of the shaman, they might not take the initiative to hunt it. Just like the mentality of most warriors, hunting was more meaningful. For them, an animal that was no longer fierce was enough to be ignored. They often saw the eagle flying around in the sky, but they never thought deeply about what it could do. It wasn't that they were stupid. It was just that hundreds of years of thinking and views made them unable to think in that direction. Including Yang Guang and his sister. Cha-cha hovered high in the sky but didn't land. Xiao Xian raised his hand and made a gesture. Then, everyone saw the eagle in the sky fly towards Xiao Xian. It's so far. That bird can actually see his hand movements. Someone sighed softly. My father said that eagles can see rabbits very far away. Another person said. Amazing. Then it can also see danger from afar. If it can really see danger, then father and the others wouldn't have to take the risk. Someone said. The discussion in the surroundings suddenly stopped. That's right. If it can see danger from afar and give it a warning in advance, when they go out hunting, they can avoid some unnecessary trouble. Everyone thought. But they still didn't think that a beast could do that. It wasn't a human and couldn't speak. It was just a bird that could fly. Whoosh! A black figure flashed past, and even the surrounding snowflakes were forcefully changed direction. Everyone looked. Following the sound of wings flapping, Cha-cha landed on Xiao Xian's outstretched arm. Cha-cha didn't have stage fright even with so many people around. Its eagle eyes swept around and then it pecked at its feathers. Xiao Xian lowered his arm so that Yang Guang and his sister could talk to Cha-cha better. Cha-cha, help me hang this on that tree. There are branches at the top of the tree. Any branch will do. Yang Guang and his sister took out the stone card in their hands and said to Cha-cha. The stone card wasn't big. It was less than half the size of their palms. It was tied with a leather string. Many children in the mountains had such a stone card. Some were prepared when they were born and some were written later. Even if many people didn't know how to use such a stone card, they would make one for themselves when they saw others making one. The stone card was made of medium to high-quality stones. The leather string was also made of ferocious beast skin. It wouldn't break easily. While Yang Guang and his sister were holding the stone card and talking to Cha-cha, the others were also staring at them. Most of them still didn't believe it. Seeing that Yang Guang and his sister were talking to Cha-cha like that, they couldn't believe it. Can it understand? The beasts in the mountains are also very smart. Even if it can understand, can it do what it says? It can't be, right? My father said that the birds in the mountains are very ferocious. How can it be obedient? Some people were whispering to each other about their understanding of the eagle. When they turned their heads, they saw Yang Guang and Guang Guang reach out to touch the eagle. Everyone stopped talking and stared at the eagle. Cha-Cha was a little impatient. Every time they touched it. Seeing Cha-Cha pecking at Yang Guang and his sister's hands, everyone's heart was in their throat. Even Meng and many other young totem warriors were staring at them without blinking. Those who had hunted before naturally knew how ferocious this kind of bird was. The man who was kicked by Guang just now was still laughing in his heart. Look, he was pecked. It was said that a peck from an eagle could cut off a piece of meat. However, to everyone's surprise, the brother and sister who were pecked didn't have any wounds on their hands. Sure enough, this bird was raised to the point that it didn't even know how to peck. Its soft pecking was simply incomparable to those eagles in the mountains. Some people suddenly showed a look of disdain. Until a man next to Mao approached Cha-Cha with a wooden stick. He wanted to touch it but didn't dare, so he had to use the stick to test it. As a result, before the stick could get close, Cha-Cha flapped his wings and pecked at the stick with all his strength. Tut! That man only felt that his hand holding the stick was a little numb. He looked at the place where the stick was pecked, and there was a hole on it. If the stick wasn't thick enough, it would have been pecked through. Now, no one said anything. If anyone didn't believe it, they could try it with their hands. However, no one was a fool. Cha-Cha still wanted to attack the man who stretched out the stick, but was stopped by Xiao Xian. Unauthorized people will be attacked if they come close, Xiao Xian said. At this time, Yang Guang and his sister had finished talking with Cha-Cha. They handed over the stone card in their hands. The two stone cards were stacked together with a leather rope. They even rubbed together to make it look like a rope. Cha-Cha, if you can help me, I will ask my father for some ferocious beast meat for you when we go back. Guang said. Go. Xiao Xian raised his arm. Cha-Cha exerted force on its claws and flapped its wings. When it flew up, it grabbed Yang Guang and his sister's stone card. In the blink of an eye, it had spread its wings and was in the sky. Xiao Xian had done similar training before, and it was even more difficult than this. Therefore, the task of hanging Yang Guang and his sister's stone card on the branch at the top of the stone tree was quite simple for Cha-Cha. Xiao Xian wasn't worried. At the side of the training ground, everyone looked at the eagle flying towards the stone tree. While everyone was thinking about when it would slow down and what to do when it got close to the tree, Cha-Cha didn't slow down. It flew past the branch at the top of the stone tree like the wind. Many people didn't see Cha-Cha's movements clearly. In their eyes, the eagle just flew past the tree quickly and didn't do anything. It didn't do as we said. Someone said. It seemed that it should be like this, but there was also an indescribable disappointment. No, it has already hung the stone card. The person standing behind Meng said. After all, totem warriors were different from unawakened people. Their eyesight was also much better. As soon as he finished speaking, everyone heard a ding sound from above. It was the sound of the stone card hitting the ice on the branch. After the stone card was hung, it would slide down along the tip of the branch. In this kind of weather, soon the leather rope on the stone card would be covered by the ice, just like the other stone cards. No matter how strong the wind was, it wouldn't be blown off. When winter ended, the ice layer on the branches would melt, and grayish-white leaves would grow from the tips. These leaves would also prevent the wind from blowing the stone tablet off. Therefore, unless someone deliberately went up to take the stone tablet off, generally speaking, no matter how strong the wind, it would be very difficult to blow the stone tablet off from the top. Meng's expression kept changing. How could they use such a method? But it didn't violate the rules. They had never thought about it, and had always thought that wild beasts and ferocious beasts were used to hunt, and were in a state of opposition to humans. Why were wild beasts so obedient? Caesar was like that, and even this eagle was like that too. Among the people present, some people looked at the eagle that returned to Xiao Xian's arm thoughtfully. When they couldn't do it, when they racked their brains and couldn't come up with a perfect solution, they didn't know that it could be done this way. Chapter 108. After completing the task, Xiao Xian let Cha-Cha, who was already impatient, fly away. Speaking of which, Xiao Xian took advantage of the loophole in the rules, which was a bit of a bully. However, the current situation was a bit special. The other party was forcing them to do something they didn't want to do. In the past, they would just bend the rules directly. Under such circumstances, no one could climb up the stone tree. At the same time, Xiao Xian also knew Yang Guang and his sister well. Although they had Cha-Cha's help now, they would still climb up once the ice on the stone tree melted after winter. Even if they only climbed up to touch the stone card, it would make them feel at ease. Only then would they be justified. Sure enough, after Cha-Cha flew away, looking at Meng's gloomy face, Guang snorted, "After winter ends, if we don't awaken, we will climb up again. Just you wait." Yang nodded at the side, "I will climb too." Although Cha-Cha had flown away, the situation just now had left a deep impression in many people's minds. It didn't matter how much it affected them. If they encountered similar situations in the future, they might remember it again. Children's ability to accept things was stronger than adults. Changing one's mind naturally started from a young age. Moreover, after this winter ended, Xiao Xian planned to bring Caesar out for the next year's hunt. He also hoped that everyone would gradually accept this method. In the pictures drawn by the ancestors of the tribe, there were also scenes of hunting with hunting dogs. Perhaps one day, such a grand scene would appear again. The witch's attitude was the same. "Alright, since the matter is settled, I'll go back," Xiao Xian said to Yang Guang and his sister. "Don't go. Brother Xian, we still have a duel later." "I want to fight," Guang said. When the people on Meng's side heard this, they immediately started shouting. "Guang, you're not allowed to fight." "That's right, you can ask Yang to do it." "Yes, yes, yes." "Yang, how could you let your sister participate in the battle?" Previously, they had deliberately made things difficult for Yang Guang and his sister. One reason was that both sides were fighting for territory, and they wanted to discuss the other. Another important reason was that Guang was very strong, and she was a girl. If she were to fight, Mongols would not be able to find a suitable candidate. Now that someone told Yang to come, they all shouted in response. Xiao Xian looked at this group of kids and laughed in his heart. This group of silly children, they were still aware that they had been deceived by the two siblings. Just now, when someone had asked for Yang to come, the two siblings couldn't help but smile. 2 out of 3 matches, each side would send out 3 people. Xiao Xian, Mao, and the others were standing aside and watching. The fight between kids who hadn't awakened their totemic power was very simple. They were not allowed to use stone tools, and fought with their bare hands. They had learned all their moves from their elders. However, because they had never hunted before, their strength was not high enough, and they were wearing thick clothes, their momentum was naturally much weaker. Xiao Xian looked at the kids on the field. Because they were wearing too much, they looked like 2 fat dumplings bumping into each other. Xiao Xian almost laughed out loud. However, for these kids, this was a very serious matter. Xiao Xian also kept a straight face. Just as Xiao Xian had expected, after Yang went on the field, he had thrown his opponent to the ground 3 times in less than 2 breaths. The 4th time, he directly pressed his opponent to the ground and beat him until he admitted defeat. It seemed that Yang had been suppressing his anger for a long time, and now he wanted to vent it out. Looking at the expressions of the people around, except for those who already knew what would happen, the others were all very excited. In the end, Meng was the only one who won 1 match, and lost the other 2. They didn't need to come for the next 20 days. There was one good thing about the children in the tribe. After they lost, they wouldn't find too many excuses, and they wouldn't deliberately trip others up. Wherever they fell, they would get up again. If they lost, they would fight back the next time. Yang Guang, his sister, and the others were cheering, and they were even discussing how many stone tools they would bring tomorrow. The young warriors were also about to leave. However, when Xiao Xian was about to leave, someone on the other side said, "Wait. What? What do you want to say after losing?" Do you want to fight in person, Lei? Mao said sarcastically. The Lei mentioned by Mao was the one who had been standing behind Meng just now. Lei awakened his totemic power a year earlier than the others, and he was older than Xiao Xian and Mao when he awakened his totemic power. All in all, he was 2 years older than Xiao Xian. He was also the best warrior among the group of people who awakened their totemic power that year, and he brought back the most praise. He had awakened his totemic power for 2 years, and he was already older than Xiao Xian, so now he was even taller than Xiao Xian by a head. Lei just glanced at Mao casually. If I fight in person, do you think you can beat me? He said that with disdain, as if he was bullying unawakened kids. Before Mao could refute, Lei moved his eyes away, and looked at Xiao Xian. I have someone here who wants to talk with Xian. Usually Xian is learning herbs from the shaman, so it's hard to find him. Since we met today, why don't we practice our skills? It's also a good chance to show the unawakened ones what a totemic warrior level competition is like. When Lei said totemic warrior level, his tone was full of pride. Not only Lei, but the others were also excited when they heard this. The young totemic warriors wanted to show off, while the unawakened ones were looking forward to it. Their parents' generation was their parents' generation, and their generation had their own competition. As soon as Lei finished his words, someone stood out. Tai. Mao looked at the person who stood out and frowned. Tai, Xiao Xian, and Mao were all awakened in the same batch, but Tai was in another hunting group, so Xiao Xian didn't know him well. Tai stretched his wrists, looked at Xiao Xian, and said, I heard you are the best in our batch of awakened ones, and I've been wanting to fight with you for a long time. Hearing Tai's words, someone on Mao's side couldn't help but say, how can he be the best in our batch? Shut up. Mao glared at the one who just spoke. He wasn't convinced, but he remembered that Xiao Xian did much better than him in the last hunting trip. Besides, if it weren't for Xiao Xian, he would have been eaten by the thorn-black wind. His father also told him that he was no match for Xiao Xian for the time being. Although it had been half a year since Xiao Xian said those words, Mao had been making progress all the time, and he improved faster than most of the kids in the tribe. Because he and Xiao Xian were not in the same hunting group, and Xiao Xian wasn't in the advanced group, neither Mao nor Ta knew about Xiao Xian's current strength. Mao didn't believe that Xiao Xian hadn't made any progress in the past half a year. Just look at the game he brought back every time. Xian. Mao looked at Xiao Xian, wondering what he meant. Xiao Xian didn't want to compete with him in this way, but he couldn't refuse. If he made an excuse at this time, he would be regarded as a coward. If someone challenged him, he had to accept it. People in the tribe had always been like this. Since he couldn't refuse, he would accept the challenge. It was a good chance for him to see how powerful the kids in the same batch as him were. Putting down the things in his hands, Xiao Xian said to Yang Guang and his sister, help me keep an eye on them. Ever since Tai stepped forward, there was an empty space around him. Xiao Xian walked into the field, looking at the kid who was about the same height as him. Tai's eyes flashed with hostility. The cloak he was wearing had already been thrown aside. Wearing a sleeveless animal skin coat on such a cold day, it was hard to tell if he was trying to show off the difference between a totem warrior and an unawakened child, or if he was trying to make it easier for him to move around, or if he was trying to show off his totem patterns during the fight. Showing off the totem tattoos on their arms was indeed one of their hobbies. Tai rotated his arms and wrists, making cracking sounds. With a loud roar, the totemic power in his body instantly pulsed. The totemic patterns that belonged to totemic warriors extended from his face to his exposed neck and extended down to his exposed arms. The totemic patterns were very obvious as well. The flame tattoos extended 5 or 6 centimeters from his shoulders to his arms. Seeing the totem tattoos on Tai's body, many unawakened kids were envious. Every time they compared the totem tattoos on their arms, they could only stand aside and watch. Among the awakened kids in the same batch, Tai's speed of improvement was quite fast. Because Tai always kept a high profile on the mountain, everyone knew about his level. Then, the crowd turned their eyes to the other side of the field. They knew very little about Xiao Xian's current strength since he came out of the cave under the mountain. Unlike Tai, who kept a high profile, Xiao Xian was as quiet as a piece of wood. Chapter 109. The scene looked a little strange. If he didn't know that the two were going to compete, he would have thought that Xiao Xian was asleep. The snow was still falling, and the cold wind was blowing. Some of the unawakened children wrapped themselves in animal skins, but their eyes were fixed on the other side. Tai waited for a long time, but still didn't see any reaction from Xiao Xian. He wondered what Xiao Xian meant. Did he really want to compete with him? Or was he playing with him? Thinking of this, Tai couldn't help but feel a little angry. Ray and the others were also confused. Not taking it seriously. Not in the right state. No, that's not right. Ray's eyes flashed. Aura. When hunting, warriors would have a habitual way of hiding their aura. Before hunting, they couldn't let the prey detect them. Therefore, the warriors would hide their aura. Many of the older warriors had already made it a habit. They would carry this habit with them when they walked, making no sound. In contrast, most of the younger warriors didn't have such a habit. Of course, it wasn't something that could be done just because they wanted to. There was no need to do it deliberately. It was just a habit that was formed naturally after many hunts. Inadvertently, they had already entered the best state. In the past, when the elders in his family practiced with Ray, they were in such a state. There was no fighting spirit, no totem patterns, and they looked careless. But once they attacked, they would instantly kill the enemy. However, that was a habit that only warriors who had hunted for many years had. How long had this person been hunting? It had only been a year since he awakened. Moreover, this person was 2 years younger than him. Thinking of this, Ray's eyebrows couldn't help but twitch. He opened his eyes wide and stared at the other side. He wanted to see if the next development was as he expected. That's enough. Xiao Xian, who was still like a block of wood, said. Originally, Tai was quite angry when he saw Xiao Xian like this. He wanted to say something, but he was a little surprised. However, since Xiao Xian had said so, he didn't care about anything else. However, there was a faint sense of uneasiness in his heart, but he couldn't explain why. As for Xiao Xian, Tai's understanding of him was limited to the discussions of the people in the tribe. For example, he had found his ancestor, he had been accepted into the advance party, and he had raised a wolf and a bird that had no spirit at all. There were also some who said that Xiao Xian was the most outstanding among their batch of awakened, but Tai had always been skeptical about this. How powerful could a person who was about the same age as him, who had awakened at the same time as him, and who came from a cave under the mountain be? He had never heard of Xiao Xian defeating anyone. All right. Tai stomped hard on the ground and rushed towards Xiao Xian. With every step he took, the snow on the ground was blown away by his powerful stomps. Muffled thuds could be heard from the ground due to his powerful stomps. A ferocious aura spread out. The people around could clearly feel the pressure brought by Tai at this moment. It could be seen that Tai's explosive power was indeed astonishing. On the other hand, Xiao Xian was still standing there like a block of wood. He did not put up a defensive posture, nor did he reveal any totem patterns. Was this guy stupid? Everyone was puzzled. Not only the others, but even Tai, who was already swinging his fist at Xiao Xian, was also puzzled. However, since he had already made his move, there was no reason to take it back. No matter what he was thinking, he would fight first. Bang! Fist and flesh collided. What was this? All the emotions in Tai's heart turned into shock. How was this possible? This was the same thought that emerged in everyone's mind at the same time. At this moment, Tai felt as if he had been struck by lightning. He was frozen in place, his hair standing on end. Although the wind was howling in the heavy snow, his back was drenched in sweat. He looked at the palm that blocked his fist. It was about the same size as his palm, and looked normal, but it stopped his fist from moving forward. His line of sight followed the palm that blocked his fist. The palm was covered by an animal skin sleeve, and the arm was not exposed. He could not see how far the totem patterns in front of him had spread. Further up was a face that was already covered with totem patterns. A moment ago, there was no trace of totem patterns, but now, Xiao Xian's totem patterns did not spread gradually like Tai's. The totem patterns on his face seemed to have appeared suddenly at that moment. Everyone knew that the totem patterns on the body appeared gradually from the top to the bottom. The speed at which they appeared was closely related to the user's control of totem power. The stronger the control of totem power, the faster the totem patterns would appear. However, the totem patterns on Xiao Xian's face appeared without any warning. In an instant, they all appeared. What level of mastery did this person have over the totem power? No one wanted to think too deeply. Tai met Xiao Xian's eyes, and his scalp went numb. He looked at Xiao Xian's eyes as if he was looking at a ferocious beast that had just bared its fangs and was about to break his arm in the next moment. Retreat. This was the only thought in Tai's mind at the moment. Tai put his feet on the ground and wanted to retreat, but he soon found that he could not retreat. The 5 fingers of the hand that had been blocking the fist had already bent and firmly grasped the fist that he had swung out. Ray, who was standing at the side, closed his eyes. One move to determine the winner. There was no need to continue. He did not know that someone in the tribe had reached such a level. His great-grandfather had once told him that he should have a long-term vision and not just look at the people around him. However, he had never thought that there was anyone in the tribe who was worth paying attention to except the people on the mountain. Now it seemed that he was still too narrow-minded. When he opened his eyes again, the shock on Ray's face had disappeared. Tai, you lost, Ray said calmly. Lost? Tai, who was about to retreat, was stunned for a moment before he came to his senses. Yes, he lost. Tai only felt that the hand that held his fist loosened, and he could not withdraw his arm. He regained his freedom again. I lost, Tai said. Tai looked up at the person in front of him again and found that the totem patterns on Xiao Xian's face had disappeared completely, as if they had never appeared. The fist that hits the tiger should hit the tiger's head, Xiao Xian said. That's right. Ray thought for a moment and said, it's really boring to fight in the tribe. I understand what you mean. Xiao Xian looked at Ray. What do you understand? He felt that something was wrong. Ray felt that he had understood Xiao Xian's words, so he continued, just like how we walk the road of glory every year, the prey is the best way to measure our ability. The others also showed an expression that said, that's right. Even Tai, who had been a little depressed, immediately felt refreshed. Good. Then let's compete with the prey. Count me in, Ray said. In hunting, it was not always about fighting that one could hunt more prey. There were many other factors. After the adjustment in the first year of awakening, they were already experienced warriors from the second year onwards. They did not need to give in anymore. I want to join, too, Mao said. With Ray and Mao taking the lead, the other young warriors also clamored to join. Xiao Xian, who was standing next to them, was speechless. That was not what I meant. Xiao Xian originally just wanted to say that instead of fighting with their own people, they might as well go back and practice more. When they went out hunting next year, they could use their killing skills on the prey. In the competition between tribes, because the stone tools were not durable, and the high-quality stone tools were very precious. Except for hunting, they were not willing to take them out. Therefore, when they competed, they only fought with their bare hands. Wooden sticks were only suitable for people who had not awakened yet. It was okay to use such competitions to communicate with each other. They could practice and exercise when they had nothing to do. But if they wanted to compete with each other, it was not necessary. This was Xiao Xian's idea, because the behavior of totem warriors in daily life was completely different from that of hunting with tools. However, Xiao Xian did not expect that his words would be misunderstood like this. These people were so excited that even 10 wild beasts would not be able to pull them back from their thoughts. Since we have decided to compete with the prey, then, should we compete with one prey or quantity? Someone asked. Mao and Lei looked at Xiao Xian at the same time. Xian, since you proposed it, how do you want to compete? Mao asked. Proposed my ass. Xiao Xian raised his hand and rubbed his forehead. If he could, he really wanted to swallow the words he just said and change them to something more straightforward. His words caused so much trouble. What a cheap mouth. However, after thinking about it carefully, this method was actually not bad. It was much better to compete with each other than having a civil war in the tribe. After a year of hunting, the young warriors had matured a lot. They knew that they could not be impulsive in the hunting field. Under this premise, it was also a good thing to strive for better and more prey. Too short a time was definitely not good. It was inevitable that some people would be eager for quick success. Moreover, they belonged to two hunting groups, so the environment would affect them. Let's do it for a year. Next winter, we will compete with each other with the results of a year. Xiao Xian said. Mao and Lei also thought it was a good idea. Okay, let's do it for a year. There were too many people who wanted to join, so Lei said, why don't we use animal skin rolls to record the names of those who want to join the competition? I have animal skin. A young warrior took out a piece of animal skin. Where's a pen? Who has a pen? And paint? Mao looked at the people behind him. Use this. Xiao Xian took out a charcoal pencil he made himself and handed it over. What is this? Can you write? Someone asked. It was the first time for many people to see Xiao Xian's charcoal pencil, but Mao used to be in the same hunting group as Xiao Xian, so he knew how to use it. Taking the charcoal pencil, Mao wrote his name on the animal skin roll. After that, he handed the pencil to Xiao Xian. When Xiao Xian finished, the pencil was snatched away by Lei. He grabbed the pencil like a stone knife and wrote his name. After that, the other warriors also scrambled to write their names. In the end, all the totem warriors present, including Moer, Ku, and the others, wrote down their names and joined the year-long competition. Like Moer, there were many people who were not interested in fighting. However, they felt that it was better to compete with prey. Yang, and some others who had not yet awakened their powers, or who might awaken their powers after the end of this winter, were all eager to have a try. However, they could only stand aside, because Lei and Mao would not allow them to join the competition. Newly awakened warriors would have a long time to adjust and adapt at the beginning. Everyone didn't want them to be too impatient and disregard the rules of the hunting team, such as Hoodlum, who had almost caused trouble. Therefore, the group of fat dumplings could only stand by the side, wrapped in thick animal skins, and glared angrily. Chapter 110. Because of the one-year promise and the animal skin scroll signed by so many young warriors, no one cared about who won or lost the previous fight for the territory. Winning or losing in the fight for territory was a matter for those little brats, but this challenge scroll was a competition between totem warriors. Which one was more important and more attractive? It was obvious. Xiao Xian had been delayed on the mountain for a long time. When he came down from the mountain, he was a little later than usual. Is there a lot going on in the medicine house today? Or is there something wrong with the shaman? Seeing that Xiao Xian had just come back, old Ku asked nervously. It's nothing. The medicine house didn't have many tasks today, so I left early. I just met some people on the mountain and we talked for a while. Xiao Xian said. Old Ku was relieved after hearing this. He even agreed with Xiao Xian and said, it's good for you to talk more with other people on the mountain. Okay, I know. After eating something, Xiao Xian went back to his room. He rolled up his sleeves and slowly activated the totem power in his body. This time, it was different from the time on the mountain. Xiao Xian slowly controlled the totem power, and the totem pattern on his arm gradually showed up. The flame-shaped pattern extended from his shoulder to his arm. It went past 1/3 of his upper arm, half of his upper arm, 2/3. The totem pattern extended all the way to 2/3 of his upper arm and stopped. During the last hunt of the year, Xiao Xian remembered that the totem pattern on his arm only went past half of the way, not 2/3 of the way. After the hunt, Xiao Xian didn't have much time to train at the training ground. After that, he began to learn about herbs from the shaman and how to draw Wu roll. The power of inheritance. Xiao Xian felt the totem in his mind. The fiery red flames enveloped the two horns, and at the bottom of the flames near the horns, the blue flames were clearly visible. Compared to when he first learned Wu roll, the number of blue flames had increased by a lot, but the number of red flames had not decreased. On the contrary, the flames had grown even taller. Now that it was not in a state of battle or hunting, such a flame body meant that it usually maintained this state. Xiao Xian hadn't noticed it before, but when he was drawing the Wu roll, he had been staring at the blue flame that symbolized the power of inheritance. Now, it seemed that the addition of the blue flame had also expanded the overall flame on the totem. Practicing the power of inheritance actually had such benefits? Xiao Xian hadn't expected this at all. No wonder Xiao Xian felt that his control over his totemic power was much more stable than it had been during their last hunt. He didn't expect to defeat Tai in one move, and he thought that it would take a while to determine the winner. However, the moment Tai revealed his totemic patterns, Xiao Xian suddenly had a feeling that the person in front of him was not that strong, and that he could deal with him easily. Xiao Xian didn't know if the other people whose totemic patterns had spread to 2/3 of their upper arms had the same feeling. He carefully recalled the situation at that time, and carefully felt the changes of the totem. Then, with a wave of his arm, he took out the animal skin roll, pen, and paint box, and continued to draw the Wu roll. The people on the mountain only came back to their senses after Xiao Xian left. Tai said regretfully, "I forgot to ask him where his totemic patterns are now." Ray looked at the place where Xiao Xian had been standing. There was a pair of sunken footprints, which appeared when Xiao Xian fought Tai, but no one had noticed it before. "You don't need to worry about his current level, as long as we can defeat him before next winter," said Ray. "You're right," Tai agreed, rubbing his fists. While the other young warriors in the tribe were thinking about what kind of prey to hunt next year, and how much to hunt, Xiao Xian still maintained his previous routine. In the morning, he would go to the shaman's place to draw, and in the afternoon, he would go to the medicine house to help. After that, he would return home and stay in his room, slowly moving his pen and drawing on the animal skin roll. Winter passed day by day. Xiao Xian went to the cave once, and found that some of the children were sleeping, while the older ones were moving stones to train their strength. It was good to have such a change. There was no shortage of food in the cave now, except for the fish they had stocked up before winter. Sometimes, the Cha-Cha would go out and catch some small animals. If they didn't want to eat them, they would throw them to the children in the cave. Everything was developing in a good direction. Xiao Xian stretched himself and looked at the almost finished drawing on the stone table in front of him. Drawing a picture was not as difficult as it used to be. In the beginning, he needed to rest for half a day to draw one picture, but now, he could draw several pictures in half a day. After that, he could go out and train Caesar and Cha-Cha. The shaman gave him 2 animal skin rolls, one of which Xiao Xian took up the mountain every day to practice copying the Wu roll or drawing by himself, and then he would show it to the shaman to check the results. As for the other one, Xiao Xian practiced it at home, so the shaman didn't know. In the shaman's eyes, it was already very rare for Xiao Xian to draw so many pictures every day, and it had already exceeded his expectations. The shaman would never have thought that Xiao Xian would draw on the other animal skin roll every day after he went back. It was not a copy, but an original drawing based on his own consciousness. Xiao Xian planned to give the drawings he was drawing to the shaman when the time came. The shaman taught him herbs and taught him how to control the power of inheritance. Xiao Xian also wanted to repay the shaman. For the tribe, he had to stay here and sacrifice a lot. It was difficult to be the shaman. However, the shaman probably didn't think so. Even though Xiao Xian felt that it was not easy to sit in this position, the shaman probably didn't think so. It was just that the shaman always had some regrets in his heart. Xiao Xian could see it in the shaman's eyes every time he looked at Wu roll. It's almost done. Xiao Xian looked at the animal skin roll in front of him and said in a low voice. Before the end of winter, the people in the tribe were ready to start selecting children of age. The shaman was busy these days, so he didn't even have time to see the results of Xiao Xian's drawings these days. On this day, the shaman finally had some free time to sit down and rest with his eyes closed. Suddenly, he thought of something and looked sideways at the animal skin roll on the short table. Xiao Xian put it here after he finished practicing this morning. At that time, he was busy with other things and couldn't see it. Taking the animal skin roll, the shaman felt that something was wrong as soon as he touched it. This animal skin roll was not the one Xiao Xian usually practiced with. Could it be that the kid had already finished drawing one in a few days? With doubts, the shaman untied the leather rope that tied it. When he untied it, the shaman thought that every time he saw the kid draw Wu roll, he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Why didn't he want to be a shaman? Sure enough, once the warriors ran out, they couldn't stop thinking about it. Children who had never gone out were easier to train. He opened the Wu roll. The shaman thought that Xiao Xian would draw some simple plants, such as jumping fruits, or some herbs that he came in contact with these days, but he didn't expect. His hands were trembling badly. On the Wu roll, the first picture was a little long. If other people saw it, they would never understand what it was about. But what the shaman saw was the huge vines between the ancient trees, the mist rising from the mountains, and the faintly discernible pools hidden by the trees. He could faintly feel the vitality and danger in it, which made him feel as if his hair was trembling with nervousness. This was a picture full of the smell of the forest. After looking at the first picture, the shaman raised his hand and put it on his chest. His heart was beating a little fast. Many shamans were taught from a young age. After they were selected, they would never leave the tribe. Therefore, the shaman had never left the tribe since he was born. Although he knew a lot of things, such as the names of the ferocious beasts that the hunting team would encounter, and where the advance group would go, etc. But he only knew about it, and had never seen it with his own eyes. Even if he saw it, it was not an active one. The prey that was brought back had already been slaughtered. Maybe when he was young, he dreamed that one day he could walk out of the tribe. But as he grew older and had been a shaman for so many years, he had calmed down and become a shaman with a heavy responsibility. He wanted to lead the tribe in a good direction. As a shaman, there were not many things that could make him so emotional at this age. But at this moment, the shaman couldn't control his emotions anymore. One picture after another, there were pictures of the hunting route, and also pictures of what Xiao Xian encountered when he followed the advance group, such as the group of dragonfly plains. The shaman read it once, and then he came back and read it again. The people outside boiled some hot water, and brought some herbs in for the shaman to drink when he was thirsty. The people who came in walked silently, and put down the stone cup carefully, for fear of disturbing the shaman. When he walked out of the door, he glanced at the shaman, thinking that the shaman might be reading another book left by an ancestor. Every time he read something left by an ancestor, the shaman would be particularly emotional or emotional. On the other side, Xiao Xian left the finished Wu roll, and went to the medicine house to help. When he got home, old Ku was already walking around the door, as if he was in a hurry. He walked around in a circle, and hit his crutch hard twice. "What's wrong?" Xiao Xian asked. "You're back." Old Ku stepped forward, and his mouth trembled. He couldn't say anything for a long time. Calm down first." "I can't calm down." Old Ku breathed heavily. After a while, he finally recovered and said, "The shaman sent a message." "Well, what did the shaman say?" "The shaman asked you to prepare for the ceremony after the end of winter." "Isn't everyone going to attend the ceremony?" Xiao Xian was confused. What was so exciting about that? "It's the core list. The group of people who are closest to the fire pit." Old Ku hit his crutch hard. Old Ku now had a sense of pride, as if his own child had finally made a name for himself. Although Xiao Xian had made contributions before, and was praised by the shaman, and could learn from him, the ceremony was extremely sacred for the people in the tribe. Anyone who could participate in the ceremony would be so happy that they would kneel down and kowtow to the mountain, not to mention the group of people who were closest to the fire pit. After all, they were not aborigines. In the past 2 years, although Xiao Xian tried his best to integrate into the tribe, he couldn't change his mind, so he wasn't as excited as Old Ku. Old Ku was quite enthusiastic. What should we wear? Xian, where did you put your clothes made of thorn black wind skin? Take it out and let me wipe it. Thorn black wind skin. I wore it once during the ceremony, and then threw it under the bed. It wasn't because it was too heavy, it was nothing for Xiao Xian. It was just that he felt like he was playing a little monster, and there were thorns on his back. Old Ku took the thorn black wind skin and left to clean it carefully, leaving Xiao Xian standing in the room. The group of people who were closest to the fire pit? Who were these people again? Thinking about it, Xiao Xian's eyelids suddenly twitched. Damn, those people who danced the ceremony dance. It was the kind of dance that sometimes looked like digging vegetables, sometimes shaking their breasts, and sometimes like a waiter shaking a rag. I feel a bit ashamed. Chapter 111. The old ancient dance was also known as the sacrificial dance in the tribe. Not everyone could learn it. At the end of every winter, during the snow festival, 50 people would be selected to perform the sacrificial dance next to the fire pit. These 50 people were all elites recognized by the tribe. However, as far as Xiao Xian knew, the 50 people on the list had always been young warriors with several years of hunting experience, as well as some people who had made great contributions to the tribe. For hundreds of years, it was very rare for a teenager to be on the list. What's more, Xiao Xian had only been awakened for 1 year. At first, it sounded a little ridiculous. When Old Ku heard this from the messenger, his first reaction was disbelief. Normal people in the tribe wouldn't believe it. However, the messenger also made it clear that it was the shaman who decided it, and he asked Xiao Xian to prepare as soon as possible. No wonder Old Ku was so excited. As an important part of the sacrificial ceremony in the tribe, in addition to the people chosen, the ancient teachings passed down in the tribe also had to be followed. However, Xiao Xian had never understood the so-called ancient teachings. It seemed that the ancient teachings were not just simple instructions. Since Xiao Xian didn't have anyone who could teach him the sacrificial dance, even Xiao Mai and his wife had never learned it, Xiao Xian could only go up the mountain to find the shaman. Early the next morning, Xiao Xian carried the stone box and ran to the shaman's place. The shaman was discussing the upcoming sacrificial ceremony with the chief and the 2 team leaders. There were many things that needed to be prepared in advance. Seeing Xiao Xian's arrival, the 2 team leaders and Chief Ao looked at him with subtle expressions. Xiao Xian's addition to the list of 50 was also out of their expectations. However, the other day, when the shaman called them over, he directly told them to let Xiao Xian in. They knew about the 1-year promise between the juniors, and they also knew that Xiao Xian had blocked Tai's attack with just 1 move. In terms of strength, Xiao Xian was indeed the most outstanding of the young warriors who had awakened in the past 2 years. In addition, Xiao Xian had indeed made great contributions last year. Therefore, when the shaman decided to let Xiao Xian enter the list of 50 people, the 2 team leaders and the leader did not object. In the eyes of the people in the tribe, it was an honor to be on the list of 50. However, the 2 team leaders who knew the secret of the list had more ideas. Every year, they would try their best to recommend people from their own hunting groups to the shaman to compete for the spots. In addition to these people, Xiao Xian also saw Tua here. Xian, I'll let Tua teach you the sacrificial dance. As for the painting, the shaman's smile deepened. You can stop for a while. Chief Ao looked at the shaman, and then looked at Xiao Xian. He always felt that something had happened that he did not know. But sometimes, the shaman was like this. It was hard to guess what he was thinking. Okay. Xiao Xian answered. Xiao Xian did not stay in the stone house any longer, so he left with Tua. Tua lived on the mountain, so it did not take long for them to arrive. Moreover, Tuo was also on the list of 50 people this year. Tuo's father and ancestors had all been on the list of 50 people. Therefore, this ancient dance had been passed down. He did not need to find someone else to learn it, because he was very familiar with it. Otherwise, the shaman would not let him teach Xiao Xian. In fact, Tuo was very surprised when he received the instructions from the shaman. After all, Xiao Xian was still young, and he was only a junior totem warrior who had awakened for a year. How could he be on the list of 50 people? Perhaps it was because he had found his ancestors, Tuo thought. I learned the ritual dance a long time ago. It's not difficult. Tuo said, I'll do it first. Watch. After saying that, Tuo began to dance in the house. His movements were still very funny in Xiao Xian's eyes. There was no beauty in it, and it did not feel very harmonious. There was also a movement that looked like washing dishes. However, Tuo's facial expression was very serious when he was dancing, as if he was doing something solemn. Even if it was just a demonstration, he was not careless at all. After the first dance, Tuo taught Xiao Xian little by little. Bend your body forward like this. Stretch your hands back, Xiao Xian learned from Tuo. He swung his arms up, down, front and back. Sometimes he had to slap his arms and thighs, or shake and step, making a strong rhythmic sound. He also had to move his feet forward, back, left and right. Sometimes he had to lean forward, then squat down, then jump with one foot, and then do a horse step. His arms were like holding a horse pole, and he had to turn his head back every 3 steps. If Xiao Xian had seen such a dance in his previous life, he would probably have laughed until he fell down. But now, he had to brace himself to do it, and he had to keep a straight face to show his seriousness. Although there was no drum or whistle to accompany the beat, the dance still had to keep a specific rhythm. It was not only the movements. Tuo told Xiao Xian that when the ritual dance was dancing, it also needed to be combined with the power of the totem. There were also other ways to combine the breathing. These were also ancient teachings. In general, Xiao Xian came to a conclusion: when the ritual dance was dancing, it also needed to be combined with meditation and a specific breathing method. What was the use of such a combination? Tuo did not say it now, but Xiao Xian could guess that it should be related to the fire seed or the totem. Xiao Xian once heard that the earliest form of human performance was the dance posture and human body movements. Dance and body movements were also a kind of behavioral language to express people's passion and desire. Here, the ritual dance was used to communicate with the fire seed and the totem, so it needed to be perceived when dancing. Thinking that the ritual dance was used in the ritual, and thinking that the 2 team leaders had been fighting for the quota every year, maybe the ritual dance was really useful. As Tuo said, the movements were actually very simple, and could be learned very quickly. Among them, the most important was how to meditate when dancing, and combine it with a specific breathing method, and not be confused. When it was almost noon, Xiao Xian had already learned all the movements. Good, you learn very fast. You didn't make any mistakes just now. Tuo said. Xiao Xian moved his arms and nodded. I have to practice harder when I go back. Yes, you have to practice hard, and don't make any mistakes. Tuo stopped smiling and said seriously, if you have any doubts, you can come and ask me. Since the shaman gave him this task, he had to be responsible for teaching Xiao Xian. There was no room for mistakes in the ritual. When the last snowflake fell, the clouds in the sky dispersed, and the moon appeared again. After a quiet winter, the tribe became active again. The shaman had already informed the tribe about the time of the snow festival ritual. On the day of the ritual, Xiao Xian took a good bath, which was something everyone in the tribe had to do before the ritual. As for the cubs in the cave, they were dragged out to brush meat yesterday. Caesar and Cha-Cha stayed at home. Today, Cha-Cha was very obedient and didn't go anywhere. She seemed to have sensed something, so she didn't stay on the roof, but went into the house early in the morning. Beasts always had a natural instinct to avoid danger. Come on, put it on and try dancing. Old Ku took out the clean thorn black wind's leather clothes and let Xiao Xian get used to it. He was even more nervous than Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian's face twitched. He took the clothes from old Ku and put on the thorny leather. In the past, when it came to dancing, most of the dancers were graceful women who swayed their hips and shoulders, and their steps were light and coordinated. But now, Xiao Xian felt like he was wearing Godzilla's body, baring his fangs and brandishing his claws. Fortunately, the tribe was dressed like this today, and they were all beasts. Old Ku had already drawn patterns on his face with plant pigments, but Xiao Xian didn't. He needed to go up the mountain in advance. The patterns on the 50 people's faces were all drawn by the shaman, and the colors were different from old Ku's. Then I'll go up the mountain first. Xiao Xian put on the thorn black wind's leather clothes and walked out of the door. Okay, go quickly. I'll go with Gu and the others later. Old Ku waved his hand and signaled Xiao Xian to go quickly. He didn't want the shaman to wait too long. There were 50 people, and only Xiao Xian was at the foot of the mountain. He didn't want others to look down on him. In front of the shaman's stone house, the others had already arrived. Many of them had already heard from the two team leaders that Xiao Xian was going to join them. So when they saw Xiao Xian, they were more surprised and didn't say much. For them, today was a very serious and solemn day. Who would have the time to think about other things? When the shaman finished drawing the patterns for the 50 people, the sky was already dark. Let's go. A middle-aged man in the team said. Because Xiao Xian had awakened his totemic power, he had grown a lot in the past year. But in the group of tall adult warriors, Xiao Xian was still very conspicuous. He was the shortest, and even though he was wearing animal skin, others could tell that he was still a child. Why is he there? Some people whispered as they walked towards the top of the mountain. Who is that? It's Xian. I know that thorn black wind skin. Only Xiao Xian could wear thorn black wind skin at this age. Did he really go to the right place? How could he be in the list of 50? How old is he? Shut up. That's the shaman's decision. In the crowd, some people were shocked, some were envious. Lang Jie and the others had already learned the truth from old Ku, but even now, they still couldn't believe it. The list of 50 people was something they had wanted since they were young. But now, it was taken by someone much younger than them. On a circle of wooden stakes around the fire pit, stone basins were filled with fresh fruits and ferocious beast meat for the ceremony. Xiao Xian followed the team and walked to the side of a wooden pile. This was his current position. The ceremony was about to begin, and there were already many people at the top of the mountain. There were still people coming up the mountain, and many people were still talking about Xiao Xian. As the youngest of the 50 people, and the only one in the last 100 years who had been awakened for only 1 year, he naturally became the topic of everyone. This year, there were more than 80 children who were about to be awakened, 2 more than last year. Among them were Tu and Jia Ba from the cave, and Yang Guang and his sister from the Qiaomai family. The sky was completely dark. The steps were the same as in Xiao Xian's memory. When the shaman finally began to chant, Xiao Xian clearly felt the totem in his mind move. At the same time, the flame in the middle of the fire pit, which seemed to be difficult to burn even for the wooden stakes, jumped up and rolled up, as if a barrel of oil had been poured into it. In the blink of an eye, it began to expand and spread. As a totem warrior, his perception of totems was naturally stronger. The rising flame in the fire pit drove the totem in his mind to also begin to expand. When the fire pit was full of flames, the two-horned totem wrapped in flames also appeared at the top of the flames. Chapter 112. The first flame of the 3 flames of the fire pit, soaring flame. Totem appeared. The totem power in their bodies became active even though they didn't actively activate it. The totem patterns on each totem warrior's face also appeared clearly. The blue and red colors in Xiao Xian's mind jumped along with the flames. Xiao Xian didn't know if it was his own illusion, but he felt that the flames in the fire pit were even higher and more intense than last year. It seemed that they would float out if he didn't pay attention. Standing next to the wooden stake, he couldn't move. Therefore, Xiao Xian couldn't observe other people's expressions. He didn't know if other people had the same idea, and he couldn't hear anything strange from the shaman's voice. Xiao Xian could only be suspicious. At this moment, the people present didn't think about anything else. They looked at the totem in the fire pit with pious eyes. The surroundings were lit up, and the whole mountaintop was covered with a layer of fire. The shaman's chanting became louder and louder. Dong! Dong dong! Drum beats with a specific rhythm, as well as the sound of bones and stones hitting, suddenly sounded. This meant that Xiao Xian was about to start dancing. With the shaman's chanting, the people next to the wooden stake began to dance along the fire pit. As an ancient dance that had been passed down since the founding of the tribe, Xiao Xian still underestimated it. It wasn't because the movements were difficult, nor was it because he was embarrassed to wash the dishes, dig the vegetables, and throw the rag in front of so many people. It was because when he started to dance, Xiao Xian really understood the mystery of the dance, and the awkwardness gradually disappeared. The sound of footsteps and the slight sound of the 50 people waving their arms gradually became unified and blended into the drumming sounds around them. The originally strange rhythm became harmonious with the addition of the sounds made by these sacrificial dancers. With a specific rhythm, one sound after another resounded throughout the mountaintop. Xiao Xian had been practicing the sacrificial dance at home these days. He memorized every movement by heart, and knew when to do which movement, so he didn't have stage fright. During the dance, Xiao Xian used the special breathing method of the sacrificial dance according to Tuo's ancient teachings to feel the connection between the totems. Gradually, Xiao Xian felt that he seemed to be connected with the surroundings. The totem in the fire pit and the totem in his mind seemed to be gradually synchronizing. Xiao Xian didn't know whether the former was assimilating the latter or the latter was influencing the former. He didn't know the situation of the totem in the other ritual dancers' minds, but he was carefully perceiving such changes. The only thing that was different was the blue flame in the totem in his mind, which was not present in the fire pit. The ancient teachings said, "Try your best to establish a connection with the totem in the fire pit." Xiao Xian felt that he hadn't completely connected with the totem in the fire pit, so he tried to mobilize the blue flame in his mind. With the accumulation of the blue flame in Xiao Xian's mind, the overall flame of the totem rose. At the same time, the flame in the fire pit suddenly rolled up, and the flame almost doubled in an instant. An experienced sacrificial dancer was so scared that he almost made a mistake. After all, he had never encountered such a thing after dancing for so many years. Fortunately, he had a strong ability to adapt, so he quickly calmed down and continued to dance. Everything around them continued. However, when they looked at the 50 people dancing around the fire pit, they felt that it was a little different from the previous years. It seemed that these people were no longer the sacrificial dancers dancing around the fire pit. They were no longer in such an occasion, but warriors armed with short swords and spears, ready to go hunting at any time. Even the experienced sacrificial dancers felt that this time was different from the previous years. They felt a kind of boiling feeling, which couldn't be calmed down. The momentum of 50 people in one was full of strong and fierce power, exuding a kind of invincible majestic spirit. If Xiao Xian had to make an analogy, even the action of washing dishes could make people feel that the momentum was strong and incomparable. Unknowingly, the fire pit had entered the second flame. Fireballs flew out radially from the fire pit. Because the original flame in the fire pit had risen, the fireballs flying out seemed to be bigger than in the previous years. With the breathing method and the perception of the totem in meditation, Xiao Xian could feel that every fireball was flying towards him. Contact and then absorption. Some new energy was flowing in his body, brought by the fireballs flying over. It flowed along the meridians and gathered in one place. The totem flame in his mind expanded rapidly with the newly absorbed fireballs. If the energy absorbed by others from the fireballs was like a trickle slowly accumulating, then the energy obtained by the people dancing around the fire pit was like rivers flowing into the sea. Xiao Xian thought that this was probably the advantage and benefit of being a sacrificial dancer. Xiao Xian heard from Mai and the others that the state of the totem in one's mind was closely related to the speed of improvement of one's strength. In this way, it was easy to imagine the benefits of being able to stay by the fire pit during the sacrificial ceremony. No wonder the two team leaders desperately wanted more people from their hunting groups to come here every year. But no matter what, there were only 50 places every year. The sacrificial ceremony was still going on, so Xiao Xian couldn't afford to be distracted. When the third flame was finished, the ceremony was about to come to an end. Xiao Xian didn't know what level the third flame had reached, but the shaman's great luck made the people on the mountaintop cheer. The 80 kids closest to the fire pit finished their awakening ceremony. Xiao Xian stopped and looked around. These kids all had totem patterns on their faces. He looked carefully and found that none of them were missing. In the past, there were always a few kids who failed to awaken and had to wait for another year. But this year, all of them succeeded. Not only Xiao Xian was surprised, but even the shaman didn't expect this result. 4 of them, the shaman thought that they would delay their awakening for a year during the pre-selection. But unexpectedly, they all woke up this time. The shaman glanced at Xiao Xian's back, then lowered his eyelids and listened to Chief Ao, who was walking towards him, talk about the idea of this sacrificial ceremony. He then went to prepare for the next step. After the ceremony, the people who came to participate in the sacrificial ceremony also went down the mountain to celebrate. The shaman had said, "Great luck." Xiao Xian went to talk to Tu and Ba for a while, then went down the mountain with old Ku. Turning around, Xiao Xian bumped into Qiao Mai and his wife, who had just finished talking to Yang Guang and his sister. "Xian, you still have 20 days to solve Caesar's problem," Mai said. "But, since you can be selected as one of the 50, it will be easier to solve Caesar's problem." Last year, Ta's hunting team set out for the first hunt, and they took turns. This year, it was Gigu's team's first hunt, followed by Ta's hunting team. Therefore, after the sacrificial ceremony, Xiao Xian still had 20 days to persuade the others in the hunting team, and he also needed to talk to Ta. In the end, it was still the big head Ta who made the final decision. Well, he also needed to talk to the shaman. Xiao Xian planned to take Caesar to the hunt this year. He had been in the hunting team for almost a year, and he had analyzed the risks, advantages and disadvantages. Of course, theory was still theory. In the forest, anything could happen, and no one could be absolutely sure. It was always better to be cautious. Therefore, Xiao Xian planned that if Caesar did not perform well after going out with Caesar, he and Caesar would stop at the first hunting place, so as not to disturb the others' later hunts. In the next few days, Xiao Xian took Caesar to the shaman and told him his idea. The result was just as Xiao Xian expected. The shaman did not object, but looked forward to it. He even specially allowed Xiao Xian to wait at the first hunting place with Caesar if something went wrong. Since the shaman had spoken, Ta did not say anything. Moreover, he had always remembered Xiao Xian's words last year, "A good dog is the hunter's eyes and ears." He also wanted to see how this wolf, who had been raised in the tribe by Xiao Xian since childhood and was thought to have lost its spirit, would perform. If it did perform well, he would not mind making it more convenient for him. After dealing with the shaman and Ta, Xiao Xian invited Caesar's hunting group to the training place. He let them watch Caesar's training, so that they could know more about Caesar's performance. Originally, they thought that since the shaman, the team leader, and Mai had all agreed, they would not object. Moreover, Xiao Xian was one of the 50 participants in this ceremony, so they did not want to offend him. After watching Caesar's training, some people even said that they would like to raise a wolf cub in the future. After all, there were always conflicts between wolves in the forest, and the loser would kill all the wolf cubs in their den. They had seen this several times, so maybe they could take the opportunity to bring some back. After dealing with the hunting group, Xiao Xian began to prepare for the hunt. The stone tools had been prepared in the winter, so there was no need to polish them anymore. Caesar's training continued every day. Xiao Xian also increased the difficulty of some traps, to see how it reacted. Caesar was very smart. Except for some too complicated ones, it could learn most of the skills Xiao Xian taught to it. Have you ever thought about what will happen to Cha-Cha in the future? Old Ku asked. Cha-Cha is not as honest as Caesar, and maybe it has already avoided us and flown out of the tribe to play a few times. Xiao Xian said. Once, he found some grass clippings on Cha-Cha's fur. That kind of grass did not belong to the tribe, but could only be found in the hunting forest. That time, Xiao Xian taught it a lesson, and it behaved for a while. But now, it probably could not hold back anymore. Now Cha-Cha had grown up a lot. In another half a year, Xiao Xian's arm would not be enough for it to rest on. But according to the shaman, this bird was still a child. It was curious, and could not be controlled. If it wanted to fly, no one could stop it. Now, Cha-Cha had already flown to the surface of the river to play. Sometimes, he would quickly fly over the surface of the water to catch the fish. After tearing them apart, he threw them into the water and watched the piranhas crazily scramble for them. This bird was not easy to tame. Nobody knew how long it would take to tame it until it could be brought out with the hunting group. 20 days later, Gigu's hunting group had not returned yet. But Ta had already confirmed the quota for the upcoming hunting trip, and announced it to everyone from top to bottom. Looking at Caesar, who was following Xiao Xian up the mountain, Old Kus suddenly felt quite reluctant. In the blink of an eye, the little wolf cub that Lang Jie had brought back 2 years ago had grown so big. Chapter 113. From the top of the mountain to the moment they left the tribe, Caesar had attracted a lot of attention. When they were walking down the path of glory, the people on both sides of the road had all their attention on Xiao Xian. Why did that wolf also want to go out with the hunting team? Were they crazy? This kind of news was enough to make the people in the tribe talk about it for a long time. When they first went hunting with the hunting team, Lang Jie told Xiao Xian, "You don't need to do anything, just keep up with them." And now, Caesar's first test was also to keep up. When people in the tribe went hunting, they relied on the early training and the guidance of their seniors. But Caesar, after following the hunting team into the forest, showed more of his animal instincts. Relying on this instinct, Caesar was not scared or flinched in the face of the strange environment. Instead, he became more and more excited. Even though he had been locked up in the tribe for 2 years and grew up in the tribe, when he came out and entered the forest, his wild nature was still aroused. He ran like a free wind. If the hunting team did not forbid him to run, he would have roared. At first, Caesar was also curious about the surroundings and sniffed around. But after several warnings from Xiao Xian, he restrained himself. Now, under the influence of his instinct, he followed the hunting team closely and did not drag them down. Sometimes the hunting team directly walked through the trees. Caesar could not climb up the trees, so he stayed below. When he was in the light, he would slow down a little, but when he was in the dark, he would speed up. This was an instinct hidden in Caesar's blood. When he was in the tribe, he did not show it. But when he was in the forest, it was very obvious. Seeing that Caesar was following them all the time and did not cause any trouble, the hunting team was relieved. On the way, Caesar helped the hunting team to lure away a large beast, and easily returned to the team. After climbing over the mountain, they arrived at the first stronghold. They rested for the night and started hunting in the morning. When they went down the mountain, Lang Jie said to Xiao Xian, "Xian, keep an eye on Caesar. There are traps in this area. Be careful not to let it be." Before he finished speaking, Lang Jie saw that Caesar had already walked to the area where the traps were set. He sniffed left and right, seemingly walking around randomly, but he didn't step into any of the traps. The other members of the hunting group also slowed down their steps and looked in that direction. In this area, there were very few large wild beasts and ferocious beasts. Setting up traps here was actually mainly to guard against them. If other large wild beasts or ferocious beasts chased up the mountain, these traps could be used to block them. However, at this moment, Caesar was walking inside, but there were no sounds of traps being activated. Coincidence? That was too much of a coincidence. In the area where Caesar was walking, there were more than a few traps. However, until now, none of them had been activated. Everyone turned to look at Lang Ga. Lang Ga blushed, and his eyebrows twitched. Obviously, the situation in front of him was also out of his expectation. I taught it to recognize some traps, so it has a lot of practice in this area. Xiao Xian said calmly. He had already expected that the traps over there wouldn't pose a threat to Caesar. When they were in the tribe, such traps were an essential training task every day. It knows how to avoid traps. Lang Ga swallowed his saliva, and found it hard to accept. If even such a wild beast knew how to avoid traps, then who would set traps for them in the future? Would it look good there? When I come back in the afternoon, I will change the traps over there. Lang Ga said seriously. Indeed, he didn't put much effort into the traps over there. After all, the chances of them being used over there were not high, and they were only used once a year. Every time he came over, he just checked if the traps were broken, and if there were any small wild beasts that accidentally entered. Seeing Lang Ga like this, I felt funny. Well, even wild beasts know how to learn. Lang Ga, you have to work harder. After going down the mountain, Caesar didn't run far. Instead, he followed Xiao Xian closely, and looked around vigilantly. 3 thorn black winds were missing at the foot of the mountain last year, but soon other ferocious beasts would enter this area. Therefore, they still couldn't let down their guard. My! There's a hole. Ong, who was in charge of scouting ahead, whispered. Hearing Aang's words, the others were all delighted. Where? After confirming that there were no dangerous ferocious beasts nearby, they immediately surrounded Ong. Xiao Xian and Caesar also went over. Ong pushed aside a bunch of knee-high grass, and a small hole was exposed. They're out. Ong said happily. The they Ong mentioned was a kind of green rodent. The hunting team called them grass rats, because they looked like a mass of green grass. Their hair was thick, and they were very similar to grass. When they quietly stayed in the grass, it was hard for the hunting team to find them. They would come out during the day and at night. The reason why the hunting team was so excited was that at this time of the year, there was a kind of plant growing on the grass rats, ratwood. Ratwood was a kind of parasitic plant in its seedling stage. Its seeds were very similar to a kind of nut that grass rats like to eat. Every year before winter, grass rats would collect food from all over the mountain, and then store the food in a hole that was several meters deep. They would hide in the hole for the whole winter, eating, drinking, defecating, and sleeping. However, the climate in the basin under the mountain was different from that on the other side of the mountain. There was no snow all year round, and the winter was much warmer than on the other side of the mountain. Even so, the grass rats living in the basin still kept the habit of hibernation. When it was almost winter on the other side of the mountain, the grass rats in the basin began to store food and hide in the hole for the winter. During the whole winter, they spent most of their time sleeping. When they woke up, they would go to the granary to find food, and then go back to sleep after eating. However, the seeds of ratwood that were brought back to the hole of the grass rats began to germinate after being eaten. They broke out of the grass rat's skin and grew into a seedling that was similar to the fur of the grass rats. The energy needed for the growth of ratwood all came from the grass rats, because there was no yangguang in the hole underground. After a whole winter on the other side of the mountain, when the grass rats came out of their holes again, the seedlings of ratwood were almost fully grown. At a suitable time, they would detach from the grass rats and begin to lignify and grow independently. And that time period was within 50 days after the end of winter. Xiao Xian had seen the ratwood in the forest. It was a very huge tree. It was hard to imagine that such a huge tree, from the germination to the seedling stage, was actually a parasite on the grass rats. The ratwood before lignification was very beneficial to people. The children who ate the seedling of ratwood would be physically strengthened, and the time of awakening would be earlier. Of course, there was also a role of quantity. The more they ate, the more obvious the effect would be. Even if the time of awakening could not be shortened, it could still strengthen the body. Many people in the hunting group had children who had not yet awakened. For them, if they could awaken a year earlier, there would be one more warrior in their family, and they could go out hunting a year earlier, with more food. For the awakened warriors, the seedling of ratwood also had a certain detoxification effect, which was better than the medicine they usually used. The people on the mountain might not care about it, but for the people at the foot of the mountain, the seedling of ratwood was indeed very attractive. What was more difficult was that the grass rats were not easy to catch. They were very good at hiding. After they left the cave, no one knew where they would go. There were many entrances to the cave, so even if one guarded one, it could still come out from another one, unless all the other entrances were blocked. Secondly, they had to hurry. If the ratwood had already separated from the grass rat, it would be useless even if they found it. Mike carefully looked at the soil at the entrance of the cave, and calmly said, "Look at the soil, they should have come out for at least half a day." Hearing that it had already been a day, everyone's excitement was cooled down a lot. They had been out for so long, how could they still find it? Can Caesar find it? Ong looked at Caesar, and asked Xiao Xian. "We can have a try," Xiao Xian said. Hearing this, everyone's excitement was rekindled. Can it really find it? How can it find it? It has never seen a grass rat. Well, let Caesar try first. Mai stopped the others from asking more. His two children had already awakened, so they didn't need the help of the ratwood seedlings. However, for its detoxification effect, they could try their best to find it. Under Xiao Xian's signal, Caesar went to the entrance of the cave and sniffed. It walked around the cave and seemed to confirm something. It had never seen a grass rat, but there was a smell around the cave, and that was a grass rat. Caesar walked a few steps in a direction, and then looked back at Xiao Xian. "Uncle Mai, it might be over there," Xiao Xian said. "Follow it." Everyone followed behind Caesar. They were not very fast, and sometimes they would warn each other when they encountered ferocious beasts. Caesar, who was tracking, seemed to be very excited. As it sped up, Xiao Xian knew that they were getting closer and closer to the grass rat. Whoosh! Caesar shot out like an arrow, jumped high, jumped over a row of bushes in front of it, and drilled into the grass that was taller than a person. Caesar! Xiao Xian was a little worried. He was afraid that Caesar would be too excited and overlook some dangers hidden in the grass. The bushes were very dense, so it was impossible to see what was hidden inside. Nobody knew what was going on inside. After Caesar rushed in, there was a rapid rustling sound, and then a squeak. After a while, Caesar rushed out of the bushes again. Seeing Caesar, everyone's tense muscles relaxed, but soon, their attention was attracted by the green fur ball in Caesar's mouth. "It's a grass rat. Quick! Xian, see if there's any ratwood on that grass rat." Everyone suddenly became excited. Caesar held the grass rat in his mouth, but he didn't bite it to death, nor did he bite it. Xiao Xian pulled the grass rat out of Caesar's mouth. Without the green fur, the grass rat was about the size of 2 fists, but with the green fur, its size had increased by 3 times. However, when he held it in his hand, Xiao Xian could feel that the grass rat was thin, which was the result of the ratwood parasitism. He didn't see any bald spots. After looking carefully, Xiao Xian's eyes fell on a hair that was slightly thicker than the other green fur. He put the stone knife back on his waist with his other hand and picked up the green hair with his free hand. Seeing a thin brown circle of wood at the root of the green hair, Xiao Xian said with certainty, "It's still there." He handed the grass rat to the people next to him and asked them to cut the seedling of the ratwood. He then looked around. When Caesar went in, he had a bad feeling. Fortunately, Caesar came out quickly. Now, not only did that bad feeling not disappear, but it also became more intense. He glanced at Caesar. The wolf that was excitedly holding the grass rat in its mouth just a moment ago now had the hair on its back standing up. "Uncle Mai," Xiao Xian whispered. Mai, who was watching his team cut the ratwood, saw Xiao Xian's reaction and realized that something was wrong. He made a gesture to the others. Chapter 114. The surroundings suddenly quieted down, and the sound of the grass being blown by the wind could be heard clearly. Because it was best to ensure that the grass rat was alive when cutting the rat wood, they didn't kill it. The grass rat in the hand struggled. The rat wood on its body had been cut off, leaving a brown bald spot in its place. But in half a year, the bald spot would be covered by green hair again. Mai gave the person a look, and the person holding the grass rat bent down slightly, put the grass rat on the ground, and let go. The grass rat that regained its freedom quickly rushed to the tall grass from before. After a slight rustling sound, the surroundings quieted down again, but the atmosphere was somewhat solemn. No one noticed the presence of ferocious beasts in the surroundings, but they could feel a dangerous aura, but they didn't know the specific location. The other party was very good at hiding, or else Mai wouldn't have missed it. The grass rat ran to the grass without hesitation, which meant that it was relatively safe in the grass. Half of the team focused on the opposite direction of the grass, while the others continued to pay attention to the surroundings. Whoosh, it sounded like the wind blowing. But there was only a light breeze around, and the wind wasn't strong enough to cause such a sound. Caesar's throat made a low growl, and at this moment, everyone's nerves were tense. Whoosh, there was another small but rapid sound, as if something was flying quickly. It was close. The surrounding trees weren't dense, and Yangguang illuminated the forest brightly. A black shadow flashed under Yangguang. Over there. Mai rushed over, and at the same time, another black shadow flashed by. In the past, the wild beasts and ferocious beasts in the forest would first attack the weakest in the team, and Xiao Xian would bear the brunt of it. He had experienced it for a whole year last year, and the others' first reaction was to protect Xiao Xian. But this time, the other party charged straight at Caesar. Xiao Xian raised his saber and prepared to step forward to help Caesar block the attack. Unexpectedly, Caesar took the initiative to meet the attack. Within a short distance, Caesar instantly accelerated. His speed was almost pushed to the limit. Like a tightened and loosened bow, he shot out and collided directly with the flying creatures. Bang! Puff! The sound of collision and the sound of flesh being cut rang out. The two landed on the ground and started fighting. It was a creature that looked like a bat with a winged claw. Its wingspan was about 2 meters. It was probably bitten by Caesar, so it couldn't fly up immediately after landing. However, such a creature should only be active at night. Why would it come out in broad daylight? While the two were fighting, Xiao Xian threw a few spear darts at the bat-like creature. It was Caesar's first time encountering such a strong opponent in the wild, and it might not be able to deal with it easily. There were already a few scratches on its body. The stinging of the spear darts distracted the bat. Puff! The sound of flesh being forcefully torn was heard. The smell of blood spread. Caesar tore off one of the bat's wings. The sharp cry almost broke through the eardrums, and the sound waves made people dizzy. But soon, the cry came to an abrupt end because the bat's head was bitten off. Following Caesar's low growl, there were a few more puffs. The dead bat was bitten into a bloody mess. Only then did Caesar stop. Caesar, come here. Xiao Xian quickly stepped forward, intending to check on Caesar's injuries. However, just as he approached, Caesar, who had been staring at the dead bat with his head lowered, suddenly looked up at Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian stopped in his tracks. He felt as if someone had poured a bucket of ice water over his head, making him feel cold. At this moment, Xiao Xian was looking at a pair of eyes filled with ferocious killing intent. The cold gaze seemed to tear everything around it into pieces. It was emotionless. In the wolf's open mouth, 4 of its fangs were stained with blood. Blood dripped down the fur around its mouth. Xiao Xian knew that at this moment, Caesar's ferocious nature, which had been suppressed for 2 years, had awakened. Xiao Xian remembered the pack of wolves in the forest where the hunting ground was located. Caesar was similar to those ancient wolves. Even if he had been a cub, even if he had lived in the tribe for the past 2 years, even if Caesar had gotten along well with the people around him, the ferocious nature was still hidden in his body. It was only waiting for an opportunity to awaken again, like a volcanic eruption. The longer he suppressed it, the more intense the eruption would be. Looking at Caesar, who was crouching beside the bat, Xiao Xian tightened his grip on the stone knife in his hand. If Caesar could not control his ferocious nature and attacked everyone, the hunting group would not spare him. Xiao Xian would stab him himself, and no one else would have to do it. After 2 years of raising him, it was impossible to say that he had no feelings for him. Over the past 2 years, he had grown from a cub that could be held with one hand to a wolf that was taller than himself. Many things had happened in between. From the cave to his own house, Xiao Xian had grown from a thin child to a totem warrior. Caesar had always been by Xiao Xian's side. However, at this moment, both Xiao Xian and Caesar, who had lost his mind, had to make a choice. First, if he attacked the hunting group, Xiao Xian would stab him himself. Second, if he did not want to stay in the hunting group anymore, Xiao Xian would let him go for the sake of the past 2 years. Third, he could control his ferocious nature and come back. Xiao Xian put his free hand behind his back, and made a gesture to the people who were on guard against Caesar, telling them not to move. His eyes were fixed on the wolf that was less than 10 meters away from him. Caesar, what will you choose? In fact, when he decided to bring Caesar out, Xiao Xian had thought about such a situation. Although he did not want to face it, if he stayed in the tribe and did nothing but eat and sleep, he would become everyone's food sooner or later. The shaman had given him a tattoo, but he could take it back. Here, a pet that only enjoyed a comfortable life was not allowed. He needed to prove his value. Blood flowed from the corners of the wolf's mouth, and its eyes were filled with killing intent. It stood there, panting. Every time it breathed, it would carry the thick smell of the blood of this strange bat. However, looking at Xiao Xian, the wolf's murderous look gradually faded away, and his eyes became clear. Wiping the blood from his mouth, Caesar looked up at Xiao Xian, and then walked towards Xiao Xian. Xian. Lang Jie could not help but remind him. They were really frightened by Caesar's appearance. In the tribe, everyone said that Caesar was a wolf that had lost his spirit, and that he was useless. Many people said that Caesar should be eaten as food. However, what was wrong with Caesar just now? Lost his spirit? Bullshit. That murderous look made Lang Jie shiver, and he almost threw the spear in his hand at him. Useless? He even tore off the wings of that monster just now. How could he be called useless? Sure enough, a beast was still a beast. His ferocity was still there. Xiao Xian waved his hand behind his back again, telling Lang Jie and the others not to make a move for now. Caesar lifted his foot and slowly walked towards Xiao Xian. His wolf claws were still stained with blood. Every step he took, he left a bloody footprint. His fur was also stained with blood when he tore off his wings, making him look even more ferocious. 8 meters. 5 meters. 3 meters, Xiao Xian looked at the wolf that was getting closer and closer. His eyes were calm, but his heart was beating faster. He stretched out the hand behind his back, but the other hand was still holding the stone knife, ready to deal with any changes. Caesar panted as he slowly walked in front of Xiao Xian. He looked at Xiao Xian, then lowered his head, as if he knew that he had done something wrong. He lowered his ears and rubbed his head against Xiao Xian's outstretched palm. The moment his palm touched the wolf's head, Xiao Xian let out a long breath and put down his hand that was holding the stone knife. As usual, Xiao Xian would rub Caesar's head after completing the task successfully. Well done. Caesar's head swayed along Xiao Xian's hand. He even stuck out his tongue and licked Xiao Xian's hand, getting some bat blood on Xiao Xian's hand. Xian. Are you okay now? Lang Jie stuttered. Caesar looked the same as usual, but after what happened just now, he didn't dare to approach him. He didn't put down the spear in his hand. I'm okay now. Xiao Xian knew that the others in the hunting group would have to guard against Caesar for a while, but he knew that it would get better gradually. After this incident, Caesar's ferocity came back. But it was good that he could control himself. Pulling Caesar aside, Xiao Xian checked the claw marks on his body. He took out some powder that he made to treat external injuries and sprinkled it on the wounds. He wanted to see if it would work. After Xiao Xian pulled Caesar aside, Lang Jie and the others walked over to check the dead bat. The other one had been killed by Mai. That one was bigger than the one Caesar killed, with longer and sharper claws. If Caesar had fought against that one, he would have been badly injured. Why did these things come out in the daytime? Another older warrior in the hunting group asked. Is it the same as last year's thorn black wind? It also came out in the daytime. Someone asked. No, it's not the same. Mai shook his head. The thorn black wind came out to take revenge on us. But, why did these things come out? I've been hunting for so many years, and I've only seen them a few times. The group fell into silence. They were not afraid of these creatures. In fact, these two were not very powerful in the forest. But, they were afraid that there might be some trouble behind them. Every abnormal situation in the forest could be a sign of something big. While they were in silence, they suddenly heard a few whistles. All the members of the hunting group were here, but no one blew the whistle. Obviously, the whistles were not from their own group, but from other groups. You guys stay here. We'll go and have a look. Mai led a few people and rushed towards the direction where the whistles came from. After a while, Mai and the others came with 5 people. The 5 of them all had different degrees of injuries. They were from a hunting group that was close to Xiao Xian's hunting route. Last year, when Xiao Xian and Mao were chased away by the thorn black wind, Mai asked them for help. Seeing the bat that was killed by Mai on the ground, the leading man's face changed. You guys met it? Not just one, we met 2. Lang Jie and the others stepped aside, showing the one that was killed by Caesar. So, you guys met it too? Mai looked at the man who came over. The man sighed. Yeah, I don't know why, these things should come out at night, but they run around during the day. Our group has been attacked many times. Oh right, we're here to ask you for a favor. While speaking, the man looked at Xiao Xian and Caesar, who was lying beside Xiao Xian. I heard that your wolf can find things by smell. Mai did not answer, but looked at Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian nodded, and answered, yes. It caught a grass rat just now. Lang Jie said. Although they were still on guard against Caesar, they could not help showing off to the other hunting groups. When they left the tribe, the other hunting groups often mocked them. We want to borrow it. The man did not care about Langa's tone, and said. What for? Mai asked. Looking for someone. Chapter 115. Among the group of people, the leading one was called Cha. He was about the same age as Mai, and was the second in command of the hunting group next door. He had a lot of authority in that hunting group, and he was also quite powerful. Among the 5 people who came, Cha was the least injured one. Did you lose anyone? Mai asked in surprise. The hunting had just begun, and no one had gone missing. Obviously, something was wrong. 3 of them went missing. When we were resting in the first location, the 3 of them went to fetch water, and then they never came back. Cha's voice was hoarse when he was talking. Obviously, this incident was a great blow to their hunting group. If something had happened to them during the hunting, it would be fine. But they went missing without any reason, and even their bodies could not be found. They were not willing to give up just like that. The place where they fetched water was also on the mountain, not too far from the cave. There were no dangerous ferocious beasts either. But, we didn't see any of them until night fell. Cheng brought some people to look for them, but they didn't find them. They only found some traces near the place where they fetched water, but it was not enough to find them. After that, we waited for half a day, and we also searched everywhere, but we still didn't find them. But, when we were looking for them, we saw a lot of these things. Cha rubbed his tired face, and pointed at the bats on the ground. They attacked the hunting group on their own initiative, and it was daytime. There were more than 10 of them, and a few of us were injured. Cheng asked me to bring some people here to ask for your help, but I didn't expect that these things had already flown here. Xiao Xian listened to him and noticed that Caesar next to him was a bit strange. He looked at his wound and found that it was not getting worse. The color of the blood was still healthy, but Caesar looked very tired. He was bitten, right? Cha said, after being bitten by those things, he will feel weak all over, but he won't die. Give him some of this. Cha handed Xiao Xian a root-like thing. Xiao Xian had learned about herbal medicine from the shaman for a long time, so of course he knew what it was. This kind of root could refresh one's mind, and could also cure some narcotic poisons. However, it was very difficult to find them in the hunting ground. Besides, Cha and the others didn't think highly of Caesar before they set off for the hunting trip. They even laughed at Mai for allowing Caesar to come with them. But now, Cha was actually willing to take him out. Seeing Mai, Lang Jie and the others looking at him, Cha said helplessly, I still need him to help me find people. That was true. Who asked you to laugh before? Now that you need help, you're looking for it, right? Lang Jie and the others really wanted to show off, but when they thought of what had happened, their hearts sank again. Disappearing without a trace, not even a trace of the person could be found. Just hearing about it made one shiver. They were not afraid of fighting ferocious beasts, but they were always nervous about the unknown. What did Cheng say? Mai asked. Cheng said that the person who fetched the water might have been bitten by those things. He couldn't fight back, and might have been dragged away by those things. But, there weren't many traces, so it's hard to find him. Cha looked at Caesar again, who was getting more and more energetic. I hope it can help. Xiao Xian checked the wounds on Caesar's body. After making sure there were no problems, he focused on the 2 dead bats. The saliva of these bats had a strong narcotic effect. Xiao Xian pried open their mouths with a stone knife, and found that their upper incisors were much bigger than the other molars, and their canine teeth were as sharp as knives. The wounds on Caesar's body were caused by these teeth. Creatures with teeth like these obviously ate flesh and blood. In addition, these bats had sharp claws, strong hind limbs, and a pair of big eyes. How is it? Can we go now? Cha was a bit anxious. The longer they stayed, the harder it would be to find them. He still didn't know how the hunting team was doing. Mai looked at Xiao Xian, and saw Xiao Xian nodding, which meant that Caesar had recovered. Mai said, okay, let's go. The hunting team went back to the cave first, and brought some stone tools, just in case. Cha led them, but they didn't go up the mountain. Although it was less dangerous up there, they had to take a long detour. They were in a hurry, and had to get there as soon as possible. So, they chose the shortest route. On the way, they met a few more bats like that, and they killed them together. Be careful, guys. Scratches are not so bad, but bites are more important. I don't have enough medicine. Cha reminded them. There are less prey in the hunting ground. The giant antler deer and giant yak herds have all left their original places, and run further away. Even the ferocious beasts are less. This is something that we have never seen before. Hearing this, everyone knew that it was not a good sign. If there were less prey, they might be taken away by other predators. The giant antler deer and giant yak herds might be moving away to avoid this dangerous place. However, even the ferocious beasts were less in the hunting ground. What could make them afraid? It's not a good thing. Lang Jie and the others whispered. They had a bad feeling when they saw those giant bats, and now they were even more sure about it. While they were walking, Xiao Xian suddenly heard some extremely sharp screeching sounds, like sound waves. However, Lang Jie and the others beside him didn't react at all, as if they didn't hear it. The hair on Caesar's back stood up again, and he stared at the sky with vigilance. Cha, Mai, and the other middle-level totem warriors, who were walking in the front, suddenly stopped. Mai made a hand gesture to the others, signaling them to be quiet and stay on high alert, while he listened carefully. It's them. Mai lowered his voice and said, "Yes." Cha nodded, "But their target now is not us. They must have found other prey." "Mai, did you hear anything?" "Why didn't I hear anything?" Lang Jie asked. "You guys are not strong enough." Mai listened carefully, and then pointed to a direction, "Go up the tree. Be careful and stay hidden. Let's observe the situation first." Since Caesar couldn't climb trees, Xiao Xian let him hide in the grass. Xiao Xian nimbly climbed up a big tree nearby, until he was high enough to see somewhere not far away. He found a thick branch with dense leaves and hid there. Looking up, he saw a tree civet standing on a branch diagonally above him. At this moment, the tree civet was tense all over, with its hair standing up. Its mouth was wide open, and its eyes were filled with fear. This kind of vigilance and fear was not directed at Xiao Xian, but at those creatures in the sky that were approaching. However, just when it was vigilant, Xiao Xian suddenly jumped up, scaring it and making it almost fall from the branch. The tree civet's round eyes stared at Xiao Xian for a while, and after confirming that Xiao Xian was not a threat for the time being, it bared its teeth at Xiao Xian and threw an unfinished arthropod in its claws at Xiao Xian, as if it was angry that Xiao Xian scared it. Xiao Xian tilted his head, avoiding the insect that was thrown at him. The insect hit the tree trunk directly, but a few drops of green liquid splashed out and landed on Xiao Xian's face. Xiao Xian expressionlessly wiped the insect's liquid off his face and cursed in his heart, "Tree civet, this little thing, really has a bad temper." However, Xiao Xian would not be angry with it over such a small matter. Suddenly, the tree civet turned its head and looked in a direction. That was where Mai had pointed just now. Xiao Xian, like the others, hid in the branches and looked through the gaps between the leaves. The surroundings were very quiet, but there was a sense of fear. On a patch of grass not far ahead, four-toothed deer stood there, facing four directions, their ears erect and their eyes alert. Whoosh! A black shadow flashed in the sky and landed on the grass. There was more than one bat. There were 11 bats that landed, and they surrounded the four-toothed deer in the middle. For most bats, it was very difficult for them to move on the ground. Even if they could move, it was very slow. However, these bats folded their wings after landing, leaving behind a pair of powerful long legs and forearms. Any one of these 11 bats was bigger than the one that Mai had killed. After the 11 bats landed near the toothed deer, they quickly ran towards it. The toothed deer wanted to jump out of the encirclement, but as soon as it jumped, it bumped into a big bat that had jumped up as well. A big bat was knocked a few meters away. It rolled on the grass and got up again, continuing to attack the toothed deer. Its sharp teeth were like razors, biting off a piece of the toothed deer's skin. The smell of blood started to spread. After being bitten, the toothed deer's movement became slower and slower. They did not manage to escape at first, and now, it was even more impossible. All four of the toothed deer were bitten, and one of them even started to feel weak in the legs. Those bats did not take the chance to continue to bite but waited patiently. When the last toothed deer finally fell to the ground, they did not start to enjoy the delicious meal immediately. Instead, 2 or 3 of them worked together to grab the toothed deer that had lost its ability to move. They spread their wings and flew away. After those bats left, the hunting group gathered under the tree. Everyone's expression was not very good. They didn't seem to want to eat their prey immediately. Mai said. Cha's face was gloomy, that's why Qing said to find the missing people as soon as possible. At least after seeing what those things did, as long as they were not eaten immediately, the missing people might still be alive. They seemed to be hoarding food, but the winter is over. A slightly older warrior in the group said, then, who are they going to feed these food to? The group fell into silence. Let's find the missing people first. Cha sighed. When Cha led Mai and the others to the first location of their hunting group, and met up with the leader of the hunting group, Cheng was applying medicine to the wounded. What happened? Were you attacked again? Cha hurried a few steps forward to check on the wounded. Fortunately, none of them are seriously injured. Cheng stood up and walked towards Mai. Finally, a smile appeared on his bitter face. "You guys are finally here." Ching glanced around, and his sight fell on Caesar, who was standing beside Xiao Xian. "I didn't expect that we would have to rely on him this time." While the two hunting group leaders were exchanging information, Xiao Xian was observing the situation in the cave. The warriors in the hunting group, who were still in high spirits when they set off, were now all listless, probably because of the mysterious disappearance of their companions, and the possible big crisis. Everyone had injuries on their bodies. Fortunately, most of them were scratches and only a few had been bitten. "The most fortunate thing is that I didn't bring those brats with me this time. Otherwise..." Ching didn't continue. If there were any newly awakened young warriors in the team, they would definitely be the ones to be attacked the most. Just like Xiao Xian last year, the newly awakened young warriors did not have much hunting experience. If they were not careful, they would die. "Xian, it's up to you and Caesar now," Ching said. Chapter 116. There was still some time before nightfall. In order to find the missing people as soon as possible, the team leader immediately led Xiao Xian out to have a look. "I want to know, after they left the cave, did they go directly to the place where they fetched water?" Cheng said to Xiao Xian. Although he knew that the missing people went to fetch water, Cheng still wanted to ask Caesar for help to make sure. "Okay," Xiao Xian answered. When they were in the cave, Xiao Xian asked someone to bring the items used by the missing people, and let Caesar smell them. Therefore, Caesar remembered the scents of the three missing people. Cheng and Mai led about 10 people each, and went out with Xiao Xian. We tried to follow those things, hoping to find their nest. However, after following them for a few times, we found that their caves were all different," said Cheng. Cha went to ask Mai for help. Firstly, he wanted to borrow Caesar to try to find the missing people. It would be best if he could find out which cave the missing people were taken to. Secondly, no matter whether he could find the missing people or not, they had lost 3 people all of a sudden. The current situation was still a bit strange, so they had to ask for help in advance. And the people they asked for help were naturally Mai's team, which was the closest to the hunting route. Ching sighed, and looked at Wolf, who was walking in the front. Caesar walked in front of the team, walking and sniffing. After leaving the cave, they were indeed on the way to the place where they fetched water. However, on the way, Caesar stopped. After observing Caesar's reaction, Xiao Xian said, "One of them went that way." Cheng looked at the direction Xiao Xian pointed, and shook his head. "There is no cave, no forest, and no water there. We don't usually go there. We didn't look carefully over there," said Cha. Cheng stayed silent for a few seconds, and said, "Let's go to the place where they fetched water first." There was only one person who left halfway, but all 3 of them were missing. What happened to the other 2 who went to the water point? The place where Cheng and his hunting group got water was a natural pond, which was near the mountainside, not too far away from their first stronghold, the cave. We usually come here to fetch water, at least 3 people at a time. There are no dangerous beasts on the mountain. Even if we encounter one, we can escape smoothly. I've come here to fetch water several times. But, it's different this time. Cha pointed at the grass under his feet. There were some marks on the grass, probably from when the missing person fell to the ground. A lot of the grass was crooked. There were knife and claw marks on a stone beside it. The knife marks belonged to the missing warrior. The claw marks were similar to the claws of the bats, and they were even bigger than the bats he had seen before. If the missing warrior was taken from the air, then it was no wonder that the hunting group couldn't find him, because there were no other useful clues on the ground. However, after being taken away from the sky, even Caesar, who had a much more sensitive sense of smell than humans, found it difficult to continue searching. "Let's go take a look at that," Ching said with some disappointment. That was the only way." The group turned back, and returned to the place where the 3 warriors separated. Here, one warrior had left. Caesar carefully identified the smell, and led the group to walk. At first, they were only at the mountainside, but then they walked up the mountain. I remember that there are a lot of rocks in that area, and it's not easy to walk. We only came here once a long time ago, said Cha. Cheng looked around, and said, sometimes, there are some mountain antelopes here. There's the smell of blood. Cha suddenly said. Not only Cha, but Mai and the others also smelled it. However, the wind was a bit messy here, so it was hard for them to identify it accurately. The group continued to follow Caesar, until they reached the side of the rock, where there was a dead body of a mountain antelope. There were many bite wounds on the body of the mountain antelope. Judging from the marks, they were caused by those giant bats. There were blood stains on the ground, but not much. Most of the blood was sucked up by those bats. If they hadn't followed Caesar here, it would have been very difficult for the hunting group to find this place. After all, they rarely came here before, and they would never have thought that the person who went to fetch water would come here. He must have heard the noise, so he followed us here, said Cha. The one who followed them here was the strongest one among the three who went to fetch water. Maybe he didn't expect that he would run into those bats who were chasing after their prey in a place like this on the mountain, and that he himself was killed, and disappeared without a trace. The food that has been eaten won't be taken away. The food that has been taken away hasn't been eaten yet, said Mai. It was better to disappear than to find a dead body. At least there was a chance that the person was still alive. The group turned their eyes to Caesar, and saw that Caesar was sniffing the ground nearby. Then, he walked towards one direction for a while, and sniffed the ground again. After that, he looked at Xiao Xian. It seems that Caesar has found something, said Xiao Xian. Is there something on the ground? Cha walked over quickly, and dipped his finger in some dirt in front of Caesar. He put it under his nose and sniffed carefully. He frowned, because there was indeed a smell. What is this smell? Probably, it's those things, urine. Xiao Xian gave his guess. Their urine? Yes. Those things ate too much, so they excrete more water to make their bodies lighter, and easier to fly. Xiao Xian said. Hearing Xiao Xian's words, Mai and Cheng all nodded. They felt that it made sense. With such a clue, the group was refreshed, and they continued to follow Caesar. After walking out of this rocky area, there weren't many trees around. After walking for a while, they approached the place where they fetched water, but they didn't go there. Instead, they kept moving forward. Those things urinated all the way? Asked Cha. Probably all along the way, but there is also the smell of people here. Xiao Xian said according to Caesar's reaction. What do you mean? Cheng looked at Xiao Xian. In other words, the people who were caught might have been urinated all over. Xiao Xian said. They were soaked in urine, and the warriors who fetched the water were all wearing furry animal skins that could absorb some water and drip it down along the road. That warrior was really unlucky. He went out of the cave to fetch water, but not only was he caught by the bats, he was also urinated all over. But, because of that, there were continuous clues left behind. The group followed Caesar and walked on the mountain. Sometimes, the smell was interrupted, so they had to expand the search area. Looking at the sky, Mai was a bit worried. If we keep searching, we might not be able to get back before dark. We don't know if there are any caves around. We rarely came here before, but those things have quite a lot of caves. We followed them and found a lot of caves on this mountain, said Cheng. Where are their caves? Asked Xiao Xian. Cheng raised his hand and pointed in a few directions. Those places are not on our hunting route, so we are not familiar with many places. Caesar had already stopped. The smell was interrupted again. This time, they might not be able to continue. What should we do? Cha looked around. They were on a mountain that was not very high. There were no trees around, only a patch of grass on the ground. They could see everything around them, and could not see anything unusual. Xiao Xian stood there. He felt that the totem in his mind was active. He looked at the others and found that they did not seem to be in the same situation. Xiao Xian carefully observed the direction where the flame on the totem was floating. He looked in that direction, and found that it was the top of the mountain. Because it was not high, there was no snow, only a patch of grass. Xiao Xian walked towards that direction. Mai and the others thought that Xiao Xian had determined the direction according to Caesar's behavior, so they followed him. As they got closer to the top of the mountain, the totem in Xiao Xian's mind became more active. In addition, Xiao Xian also heard some sounds, like the sound of air flowing rapidly, similar to the sound of magnified breathing. "Uncle Mai, what did you hear?" Xiao Xian asked. No, I think I heard it. It was the cry of those things, but it was not clear. It should be too far away," said Mai. "I heard it too." Cheng quickened his steps and ran towards the top of the mountain. "The cry of bats?" Xiao Xian frowned. No, it could not be. What he heard was not the cry of bats. Cheng, who had run to the top of the mountain ahead of the others, suddenly stood there, motionless, as if he had seen something incredible. "What did you find?" Mai and the others also quickened their steps, and stood on the top of the mountain after a few jumps. Just like Cheng, the others were also stunned. In front of them, there was a huge pit with a diameter of more than 100 meters and a depth of more than 80 meters. The inner wall of the pit was not as barren as the other parts of the mountain. It was like another world inside. A few thigh-thick vines were intertwined and extended downwards, with huge umbrella-like leaves spreading out. The inner wall of the pit was also filled with all kinds of plants, some of which were even blooming and bearing fruit. This place is, Cheng had never come here before, so he did not know there was such a huge pit here. When they were chasing those things, they had never walked to the top of the mountain. Xiao Xian stood on the edge and looked down. It was still bright, and there was enough light to see the bottom of the pit. However, compared to the inner wall of the pit, there were fewer plants at the bottom of the pit. There were only some unknown kinds of grasses, which were monotonously distributed there. The totem in his mind was unusually active, and the flames around the horns were dancing. Something was attracting him down there. There are quite a few precious herbs down there, some of which I have only seen on the animal skin rolls in the shaman's place," Xiao Xian said. Mai and Cheng looked at each other and said, "Let's go down and have a look first." "You guys wait and see." Mai, Jia, Cheng and the others went down along the vines to see if there was any danger in the pit. Xiao Xian, Lang Jie and the others were waiting on the top, and they would act according to the situation. Just like what Xiao Xian had said, there were many herbs growing well in the pit. Some of them were the ones they used to resist the bat's poison. There were quite a lot of them, which was a pleasant surprise for the hunting team. After looking around, Cheng made a gesture to the people above, indicating that they could come down, but they had to be careful, because there were still unknown dangers. There were some thorns on the vines, so they were not slippery. It was a good thing for everyone, because it made it easier for them to move. Xiao Xian went down with the others, leaving only Caesar above. There were many medicinal plants around the inner wall of the pit, so they cut down the ones they knew that could be used in emergencies first. Xiao Xian did not pay attention to the rare plants around first. After landing at the bottom of the pit, he felt that the flames on his totem seemed to be excited. He looked down at his feet. It was a field of bat shit. Chapter 117. The smell was not good. There was a thick layer of bat feces on the ground. Some of them looked like they had been here for a long time, while some were still fresh. It meant that there were bats here every day, but they were not here yet. Maybe they would come back at night. There were many big cracks on the inner wall of the pit, which were about 1 to 8 or 9 meters wide. Some sounds came from the cracks, which were the bats' cries that Mai and the others had heard before. Some of the bats' cries could be heard by everyone, while some were beyond the hearing ability of junior totem warriors. Only Mai and the other intermediate totem warriors could hear them. Or maybe, there were some sounds that even Mai and the others could not hear. The sound of the rapid airflow was there all the time, and it sounded every once in a while. It was very rhythmic, but only Xiao Xian could hear it. Although the sounds of bats could be heard coming from the wide cracks, they sounded a little far away. Because of this, Mai and the others allowed the people above the pit to come down. However, they also reminded them to be careful and not to make too much noise. There were claw marks around the cracks, which were similar to the ones found on the rocks at the water point. Those big bats' hook-like claws could cling to the cracks of the rocks and move around flexibly. "Chang!" Cha said in a low voice. Cha found a stone knife on the ground around the cracks, which belonged to the missing warriors. It seems that they were indeed caught and brought here. They went in from here. Cheng looked at the huge cracks that were several meters wide, and his eyes were vicious. He wanted to kill all those things. However, it was not a good time now. They brought too few people here, while the enemies were too many. There were cracks around the inner wall of the pit, which reminded Cha of the caves they found in the mountains when they were tracking those things. Maybe, those caves were connected to the cracks here. They did not know how long the cracks were, and where they extended to. They could only guess. But, those things' abnormal behaviors were similar, so their guess was more than half true. Xiao Xian kept staring at the ground under his feet, and at the same time, he felt the direction of the totem flame in his mind. It was different from when they were outside the pit just now. At this moment, the flames on the totem did not face any direction. They only rolled and rolled very violently. The others more or less felt it, but it was not as obvious as Xiao Xian. They only thought that it was because they were too nervous in this place, and were on guard against possible dangers. They did not think that it was because of the totem. Xiao Xian lifted his feet and walked slowly. Xiao Xian did not walk very fast. Every step he took was very careful. The others thought that Xiao Xian was trying not to make any noise, but other than that, Xiao Xian was still feeling the changes that came with every step. Something had affected the totem. According to the totem's reaction, it was very similar to the item mentioned in the animal skin scroll that the shaman showed him. It could be on the inner wall of the pit, or it could be under his feet, or it could be in more than one place. However, this sinkhole was too big, and they still had to be on guard against the dangers that could appear at any time. It was impossible for them to carefully check every place. They could only roughly sense and see if they could determine the approximate location. 1 step, 2 steps, 10 steps, suddenly, Xiao Xian paused. It was here. Xiao Xian squatted down and used his stone knife to scrape away some of the bat feces on the surface, revealing the ground at the bottom of the pit. The ground below was very hard, much harder than ordinary stones. It was no wonder that there were so few plants. In the surrounding area, there were only a few scattered blades of grass. To be able to grow in such a place, the vitality of the grass was quite tenacious. The rocky ground was very hard. Xiao Xian tested the hardness of the ground a little. His teeth knife could dig out a piece of the stone surface. Xiao Xian did not care about the dirt. He put his hand on the ground and felt the source of the totem in his mind. It was not far. It was under his hand. He could dig it out easily. But that would cause a lot of noise. At this time, Xiao Xian heard Caesar growling from above. "Uncle Mai. Something is coming from the sky," Xiao Xian said. After warning Xiao Xian, Caesar quickly jumped under a leaf of the vines to hide. In this way, the thing flying from the sky would not easily find him. "Hide!" Mai and Chengdu ordered their warriors to quickly find a place to hide. The others did not need to say much. They all reacted quickly and found vines or other plants to hide. The 30 people quickly hid. From the outside, it was very difficult to find them. After a while, a sound came from the sky. Xiao Xian looked through the gaps between the leaves. There were a few brown and black bats flying down from the sky. They were very big. The smallest one had a wingspan of more than 5 meters. There were 2 of them together, catching the giant antlered deer. It seemed that they had attacked a herd of giant antlered deer. Previously, they had heard that the giant antlered deer herd had migrated from this place. But they did not know whether these bats had attacked another herd of giant antlered deer or had directly chased and killed the one that had migrated. After flying down from above, they came to a wide stone gap. The bats flew in with their prey. One by one, they disappeared into the dark stone gap. However, during the whole process, a dark brown bat with much thicker fur stopped outside the stone gap and looked into the pit. Compared to their vision, their sense of smell and hearing were actually more powerful. It did not see anything unusual, but it smelled something different. It opened its mouth, revealing sharp blade-like teeth. Its specialized nose moved, making sounds that most people could not hear. Then it suddenly used its strength to push off the stone wall, spread its wings, and flew like a gust of wind. Among the people who came over, the one who was hiding closest to it was there. They had been discovered. The people hiding there had to pick up their spears to defend themselves. This also meant that they could no longer hide here. They had to leave as soon as possible. The number of bats here was much greater than theirs. Go! Ching shouted in a low voice, indicating that everyone should leave quickly. Once these bats found people, they would call for other partners. Soon, more bats would fly over. Now that they were few in number, they had to leave quickly. Xiao Xian ran to the place where he had just dug. His arms gathered strength, and he waved his stone knife. The knife flashed, and in a short moment, he had slashed several times. Bang! Bang! Stone chips flew everywhere. The thing below was also dug out. Holding it tightly in his hand, Xiao Xian did not care about anything else. He quickly stepped on the ground and retreated. He did not care about how much bat feces was on his trousers. He ran to the side of the vines and climbed up along the vines like an agile monkey. Just now, when Xiao Xian was digging, Mai heard the sound and looked over. What he saw made him so angry that smoke almost came out of his head. What the hell was wrong with Xian? Even if it was a rare herb, it was more important than his life. Instead of running for his life, he was digging. Fortunately, Xiao Xian's movements were fast. From digging to escaping along the vines, it took less than a breath's time. He did not fall behind the others. After getting out of the pit, Qing led the others and ran towards the cave of the first stronghold. Get out of here! A sharp cry came from the giant pit. Everyone heard it. When they looked back, they could not help but feel numb. In the sky above the giant pit, large bats were flapping their wings, and more were flying out. They were densely packed. They sped up and began to run for their lives. This time, they did not go up the mountain. There were not many trees on the mountain, so they might as well go down the mountain. There, they could lure some ferocious beasts to block the bats. Compared to the bats, they felt that the ferocious beasts in the forest were much more adorable. Of course, the species of ferocious beasts also depended on the species. If the ferocious beasts were the kind that would not cause trouble for the bats, but would hinder their escape, then they would be courting death. The bats chased them for a while. The hunting group was hiding and attracting the ferocious beasts to cause trouble. So they gave up and did not continue the chase. Even if they did not see the bats chasing after them, they did not stop until they reached the hunting area that they were familiar with. Then they slowed down. Here, they needed to slow down and make sure that there were no bats following them. Otherwise, if the bats followed them to the cave of the first stronghold, then they would be in trouble. How is it? Mai looked at Cheng, Cha and the others who were carefully observing the surroundings. They did not follow us. Cheng answered. Then he looked at Caesar. Judging from the wolf's reaction, he did not seem to be in big trouble. Only then did everyone take a long breath. After counting the number of people and making sure no one was missing, Mai felt a little relieved. However, when he saw Xiao Xian, his anger was ignited again. Mai strode over and grabbed Xiao Xian's animal skin coat, and said angrily, "Do you want to die? What are you digging for? Do you know you were almost caught and eaten by them? I should have let you stay outside." It was rare for Mai to be so angry. He treated Xiao Xian as his own junior. When Xiao Xian had an accident last year, he regretted not paying more attention to him. Fortunately, Xiao Xian was safe and sound. But today, Xiao Xian, who had been behaving well and obeying orders, actually did something like that. Under such an emergency situation, what was worth taking such a risk? Cha sat on the ground and panted. He shook his head and thought, luckily he is not from my team, or I would definitely beat him up. Xiao Xian, who was lifted up by Mai's coat, was also stunned. He had never seen Mai so angry since the first day he joined the hunting group. However, Mai was doing this for his own good. He was not scolding him, but just caring about him. Lang Jie wanted to say something to comfort Mai, but as soon as he took a step forward, he was stared at by Mai. He smiled embarrassedly and did not dare to move forward. What are you doing this for? What did you dig up? Take it out. If it were not for the situation, Mai would have roared out loud. Sorry, I was too impulsive. Xiao Xian also knew that he was too impulsive. He had to calm down next time. As he said that, Xiao Xian reached out his fist, palm up, and slowly opened his fingers in front of Mai, revealing the thing in his palm. It's just a... Seeing the thing in Xiao Xian's palm, Mai suddenly thought of something. Before he could finish his sentence, he was stuck there, as if someone was choking his neck. His face turned red, and for a moment, he almost stopped breathing, as if he could not believe what he saw. Cha stood up and wanted to take a closer look. Unexpectedly, as soon as he stood up, he was pushed aside by Cheng, who walked quickly to him. Pushing aside the debris in front of him, Cheng stared at the red crystal in Xiao Xian's hand. His eyes were red like Mai's, but no one knew whether it was because he was too excited, or because of the light refracted by the small crystal. Fire crystal. Chapter 118. Is it a fire crystal? Cheng's voice trembled uncontrollably, unable to calm down. Mai slowly put down Xiao Xian and looked at the red crystal in Xiao Xian's hand. He wanted to reach out and take a look, but he was hesitant about something. Xiao Xian reached out his hand and flipped his palm, letting the crystal fall. Mai was afraid that he would be too slow, so he hurriedly caught it. He held it in his hand as if he was holding a treasure. He was nervous, excited, and in disbelief. All kinds of emotions were boiling and chaotic at the moment. He couldn't tell what he was feeling. When he touched it, he could feel a warm current flowing. This warm current could only be around the crystal and couldn't extend further, as if it was confined. The entire crystal was only the size of a quail egg. Its shape was irregular, and its surface was not very clean. There were even some stone chips on it. However, the light that shone down from the gaps between the leaves above was not very bright. When it shone on the red crystal, it was covered in a thick layer of red light and shadow. The leaves above were swaying with the wind, and the light shone down was also changing. It seemed that the light and shadow around the red crystal were flashing around it, like a dancing fire, intoxicating people. Is it really a fire crystal? Cheng trembled and moved closer, wanting to take a look himself. Mai closed his hand and held it tightly in his hand. Seeing Mai like this, Cheng opened his eyes wide and the beard on his cheeks trembled. He said word by word, "You won't give it to me." Cheng looked at Mai, as if he would kill him if he didn't show it to him. The muscles on Mai's face were also trembling. He didn't know what kind of expression he should make. The two of them stared at each other for a while before Mai slowly opened his finger. It was much slower than when Xiao Xian opened his finger, as if it was in slow motion. When he opened his finger, he emphasized, "This was discovered by our team." Cheng automatically omitted Mai's, "Our team found it," and took the red crystal from Mai's hand. It wasn't as cold as the other stones. Instead, it was warm. The fire crystal. It's really the fire crystal. Cheng held it in his hand and didn't want to return it. The fire crystal was an extremely precious stone for the tribesmen. It contained the energy needed by the totem warriors, and it could also help the totem warriors improve their strength. The way to absorb the fire crystal was special. It needed to be burned on the fire seed. Part of the burning energy was absorbed by the fire seed, and the other part was absorbed by the people around the fire pit. More than 20 years ago, in Gigu's team, someone found a fire crystal a little bigger than a fingernail. At that time, more than 10 junior totem warriors were promoted to intermediate totem warriors overnight. Although several intermediate totem warriors were not promoted to senior totem warriors, the totem tattoos on their arms were closer to their wrists. A long time ago, one of the shamans had said that whoever found the fire crystal would have the priority to use it. No matter if you were from the mountain or the foot of the mountain, no one else could interfere. However, there was another point. It must be in the hunting group as a whole. Once it was found, it could be used by the hunting group, and their families could also benefit from it. No matter to Mai, Cheng, or anyone in the tribe, this was very attractive. Have you seen enough? Give it back to us. This was found by our team. Mai wanted to grab it back, but Cheng didn't want to give it back. Xiao Xian watched the two team leaders grab a stone regardless of the time and place. Weren't they afraid of attracting the bats and ferocious beasts by making such a big noise here? While the two were grabbing, Cheng said, "Our team is also here. You are not the only one here. Don't try to take it all by yourself." Seeing the two team leaders like this, the warriors in the two teams also began to discuss. Some of them didn't know what the fire crystal was, but after being told by their teammates, they understood. They looked at Cheng's clenched hands with burning eyes. The warriors in the tribe had a persistent desire for power. This desire made them willing to take any risk and face any crisis. The two sides were in a stalemate for a while. Suddenly, someone asked Xiao Xian, "Xian, where did you find the fire crystal?" Hearing this, the two team leaders stopped and looked at Xiao Xian. "It's in that big pit," said Xiao Xian. Mai didn't want to fight with Cheng. Anyway, Cheng couldn't take it all by himself. "Before you left, you were digging for the fire crystal?" Mai asked. "Yes. At that time, I felt something under my feet. It felt good. Later, when I was running away, I didn't want to give up, so I dug it out." Xiao Xian said, "Sorry, I will be calmer next time." No. If it were me, I would be even less calm," Cheng said at this time. If it were him, who felt the fire crystal under his feet, he would probably dig it out on the spot. However, this might not be noticed by everyone. After all, Xian was with the shaman. Everyone attributed Xiao Xian's discovery of the fire crystal to the shaman in their minds. As long as it was related to the shaman, they would believe it without question. At this time, Cha couldn't help but think, why wasn't he on our team? But soon, everyone realized one thing. Cheng's breathing was a little messy. He tried to slow down his tone, and asked Xiao Xian, "When you were in the pit, did you feel the fire crystal in other places?" "Yes." Xiao Xian said affirmatively. When they were running away, they felt a few places, but they didn't have time to dig it out. As soon as Xiao Xian finished his words, the surroundings became silent instantly. Then, there was the sound of rapid breathing. There were fire crystals, there was more than one fire crystal, and it was so big, boss. "Let's go dig for the fire crystal." "Yes. Let's go." Cheng's team members were all anxious, and couldn't wait to run back to the giant pit. Wait. Let me think about it first." Cheng began to walk in circles, thinking about what to do. Even when he was walking in circles, he didn't loosen his clenched fists. Xiao Xian found that the people in the tribe seemed to like to walk in circles when they were excited. Every time he saw them walking in circles, Xiao Xian thought of the dog he raised in his previous life. Every time it pooped, it would walk in circles first. If I knew there were fire crystals there, I would have tried to get more, even if I had to fight with those things. Cheng said, "But now we are back, we have to think about it carefully." "Yes, we have to prepare more, we can't rush." Although Mai said so, his tone was not much softer than Cheng's. They were all thinking about the fire crystals. Let's go back first, Cheng said. Okay. Let's go. A group of people took stone swords and spears and planned to run away. Which way are you going? I mean to go back to the cave of our first stronghold, Cheng said while shaking his beard. A group of people became listless. Back to the cave of Cheng's first stronghold, Mai finally got the fire crystals back from Cheng, and told Xiao Xian that he would keep them for now. Xiao Xian didn't mind. Mai didn't mean to keep them all to himself. Besides, to enjoy the benefits of the fire crystals, they were all in small groups, so no one could miss out. Mai and Cheng, who were more powerful in the hunting group, gathered together to discuss. Because it was Xiao Xian who found them, they also asked Xiao Xian to join them. After a night of discussion, the two group leaders finally decided to call the other 3 hunting groups. When Xiao Xian said that there were more fire crystals, he thought that if Mai and Cheng wanted to keep them all to themselves, he would stop them and refuse to help. Only they might not be able to eat that big piece of meat. After calming down, everyone knew that it was impossible for the 2 hunting groups to fight against those giant bats. Besides, there were wounded people in the hunting groups, so they were not in good condition. Mai and Cheng took out the animal skin roll and wrote a few words to the other 3 hunting group leaders in the name of their own hunting group. As for whether they would come or not, it was up to them. However, as long as they weren't stupid, they would come without arrest. Now everyone should still be in the first stronghold. They haven't gone far. We can still find them if we go there quickly. Mai and Cheng each sent a few people to deliver the letter to the other 3 hunting groups. And those who stayed in the cave, the wounded ones hurried to recover, and those who were not wounded, went out to hunt those giant bats that attacked everywhere. They killed every single one of them. Before, they all avoided the bats, but now, since they knew it was related to the fire crystals, their attitude was different. Every day, they rushed out with stone swords and spears, as if they had been injected with chicken blood. After receiving the letter, the other 3 hunting group leaders responded quickly. The fastest one came the next day, and the slowest one came the morning of the 3rd day. They brought the whole hunting group with them. They couldn't finish their hunting routes this time, but no one had any objection. Even the ancestors would crawl out and raise both hands to agree. Every member of the hunting group came here willingly, and one was more anxious than the other. They were afraid that they couldn't get a share of this big meat. 5 hunting group leaders jointly made a decision that the main goal this time was to encircle and hunt the giant pit. Before that, they had to figure out the countermeasures. Before the 5 hunting group leaders figured out the countermeasures, the members of the 5 hunting groups were in a state of high spirits every day. When they heard about the abnormal situation, all the uneasiness, anxiety, fear, and uncertainty were thrown far away. Now, they were sharpening their swords, thinking about how to kill more bats every minute. The person who was bitten was lying in the cave to recover. Half asleep, he got up in a daze, and staggered to walk in an S shape. His voice was not clear. "Let me go. I can still kill more." His teammates smiled apologetically to the others in the cave, and then walked over to pull him back. Yes, you can still kill more." Then, with a punch, he knocked the man out, dragged him to the side, and left him there to recover quietly. After that person settled his teammates, he turned around and saw that everyone was looking at him. He said innocently, "Our boss said that there isn't enough medicine. The people who were bitten will be fine after taking some medicine and sleeping. They will also recover their strength." The 5 hunting groups all gathered in the cave that became their first stronghold. It was a little crowded, but it didn't matter. Everyone was full of hope now. Everyone was looking forward to being promoted as soon as possible. Mai and the others were looking forward to being closer to advanced warriors. In normal times, they could enjoy relatively less resources. Most of them lived at the foot of the mountain. They were more ambitious, for themselves, and for the next generation. As for the advance group, well, the advance group was too far away to find them. Chapter 119. Every day, the 5 teams would send people to the mountain where the giant pit was located to investigate the situation. However, there was still no news about the 3 people who had been captured. The scouts had been observing from a distance, but they could not enter the bat cave. There were bats flying around the cave, much more than those around the giant pit. 7 days had passed, and according to everyone's judgment, the chances of the 3 people still alive were very small. However, because it was related to the fire crystals, and now it was a joint effort of the 5 teams, they could not act rashly without preparation. In that case, they would lose not only 3 people, but also 3 teams. However, many prey were caught in the cave, but nothing was thrown out. A man who had just returned from his investigation said, "Those bats would not take away the prey they had eaten outside, nor would they finish it. Most of the time, they preferred fresh blood. Once the blood ran out, they would lose interest in the prey." During these 7 days, Xiao Xian went to the giant pit again, accompanied by the top warriors of the 5 teams. This time, he was more careful. Xiao Xian carefully checked several places. Only one was close to the surface, and the other places needed to be dug deeper. The fire crystals closest to the surface were dug out, and of course, those big bats in the stone crevices were alarmed, and chased for some distance. But strangely, last time, they chased for a long distance. If the hunting team had not caused some trouble, they would not have been able to get rid of them. But this time, Xiao Xian found that those bats gave up earlier, and stopped chasing after a short distance. It seemed that for them, the hunting team was just a small matter, and they did not need to worry about it. It was speculated that the bats had slowly gathered in the mountain where the giant pit was located, and all the bats in this area had gone there. Fortunately, most of them were not very intelligent, and could only be regarded as fierce beasts. Xiao Xian wanted to make some big nets to catch the bats, but he did not have suitable materials to make them, so he gave up. With those bats' sharp claws and razor-like teeth, they could easily break vines and grass nets. In the end, the 5 leaders decided to smoke them out. There were less than 200 people in the 5 small teams, but there were thousands of large bats in the mountain. Moreover, according to the information from the observers, there were still more bats joining in. Fortunately, not every one of them was the same size as the ones they encountered in the sinkhole that day. Many of them were about the same size as the one that attacked Caesar. He could deal with one by one, but if there were too many of them, it would still be troublesome. Now, the goal of the hunting team was to dig out the fire crystals, find the missing people, and try their best to avoid direct confrontations with those bats. No matter which one it was, the bats had to be chased away first. Smoking was undoubtedly a good idea. For the people in the hunting group, they would often use some smoky plants during hunting, for example, to get rid of insects, to repel wild beasts, and so on. This time, everyone decided to try using the smoke method first. Smoke plants had to be carefully selected. If they didn't smoke the bats, they would smoke their own people to death. That would be bad for their teammates. The 5 small team leaders compared several plants that were often used for smoking, and selected the one with the most obvious effect. Those things seemed to hate the smell very much. I threw a small ball at them yesterday, and they ran away directly. Lang Jie said proudly. Yesterday, Lang Jie encountered a few bats that were hunting. They were about to succeed, but Lang Jie threw a smoking ball of grass at them, and it fell right next to the prey. The prey had already lost its ability to move, and could not run away. Those bats, who were eager to enjoy the delicious meal, screamed and flapped their wings to leave after the smoke from the grass ball dispersed. They were very displeased with the smell of the grass ball. That's great. In this way, we have a higher chance of success. Mai said. In addition to choosing the smoky plants, they also had to prepare some herbs, in case they were bitten and fainted, or got smoky. They didn't hate the smell of the smoky grass, but it was unbearable after a long time. At Xiao Xian's suggestion, people in the hunting group weaved a kind of refreshing rattan grass into masks. They would wear the masks when they entered the cave. The refreshing smell of the rattan grass could make people more awake after being smothered by the smoke. "Boss, when can we set off?" someone in the cave asked. Now they had to fight for the food they ate every day from those bats. In the surrounding area, many wild animals and ferocious beasts had left, so it was difficult to find suitable food. They also had to guard against the bats. "Soon," Cheng said. Stone tools, herbs, and other necessary items were all prepared. It was time to start. Xiao Xian sat on the side, listening to them talking about the upcoming action. He looked at his hand. In his hand, there was a small piece of red crystal, which was dug out when they went to the giant pit for the second time. There were 2 small pieces of fire crystal near the surface. One was taken away by Cheng for safekeeping, and the smaller one was kept by Xiao Xian. This small piece of fire crystal was a little bigger than a grain of rice, and much smaller than the one they dug out the first time. Therefore, the other leaders didn't show any objection to Xiao Xian keeping this piece of fire crystal. In their opinion, the giant pit was the most important thing. Feeling the warm current from his hand, Xiao Xian was very confused. Mai and the others had said that the energy in the fire crystal could only be absorbed after the fire seed was burnt. However, since the first time he held the fire crystal, Xiao Xian had absorbed a little energy from it. It was not much, but it was obvious. This time, he wanted to keep one for himself, just to make sure. In the sea of consciousness, he could see traces of red lines gathering on the totem and merging with it. Even though this piece of fire crystal was small, the energy it contained was far beyond Xiao Xian's expectation. If he used another vision ability in his body, Xiao Xian could see that the fire crystal in his hand was burning, and the red energy released by the burning made a curve in the air, and then drilled into his palm, arm, or other parts of his body, and finally gathered in the totem. 2 days later, the 5 hunting groups started to move. The assigned work had been done, and everyone was in charge of their own duties. Xiao Xian followed Mai and the others to a bat cave. At first, they planned to enter directly from the gap in the giant pit, but after some discussion, they decided against it. It was difficult to hide in the giant pit, and the bats were much larger there, so they could be easily discovered. Compared to that, the bat caves in other parts of the mountain were much easier to deal with. The bats there were easier to deal with, and there were places for them to hide. The gap in the mountain should be connected to the other caves. "Let's go in from one of them first," Mai said to his men. Everyone was wearing masks made of vines. It was not very comfortable, but it was useful. The cool smell of the vines calmed them down a lot. Looking at the direction of the wind, Mai signaled everyone to start moving. Some of them hid in the grass, and covered their bodies with grass. Others brought the smoke grass, and approached the cave. They were holding some thin and long spears in their hands, all made of wood, with bundles of smoke grass tied to the spearheads. They lit the fire, and when the fire was almost done, they put it out. Suddenly, thick smoke rose from the spearheads. "Shoot!" The thin and long spears were thrown out like arrows, flying towards the bat cave in front of them. One by one, everyone had dozens of spears tied with smoke grass. Within a few breaths, all of them were accurately thrown into the bat cave. Soon, the bat cave was filled with thick smoke. Choosing the bat cave was also based on the direction of the wind, and the one in front of them was blowing into the cave. A small part of the smoke in the cave was blown out, but most of it was blown into the deeper part of the cave. Squeak, 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 sharp sounds came from the cave, and Lang Jie and the others could hear them. They saw the smoke coming out of the cave, which meant that the bats inside were flapping their wings towards the outside. The people who threw the spears immediately got ready. Whoosh, whoosh, bats flew out of the cave quickly, and hundreds of them came out in a blink of an eye. The bats that were forced out of the cave were flying around outside, and some of them were screaming angrily. They looked around and saw a group of people standing there. Squeak, sharp screams were heard, and a group of bats that were forced out of the cave flew towards the people who threw the spears. "Run!" The people who threw the spears were the fastest in the hunting team. They ran away as soon as they saw the bats coming. In the direction they were running, there was a gray area. A former hunting group had been there once, and they knew that there was a group of giant spiders in the woods there. Plus, that gray area was not on their hunting route, so the hunting group would not go there on normal days. But now, they were going to use those giant spiders. They would lure the bats there, and let the bats fight with the giant spiders. When the bats left, the people hiding outside the cave came out and walked into the cave. They did not forget to throw some smoke grass at the entrance of the cave. According to common sense, the bats should be hiding in the cave on a sunny day like today, when the sun was shining brightly. But it was not the case. Some of the bats had gone out long ago. Some of them just went out, and some of them flew deeper into the cave. There were not many left in the cave. These bats were not difficult to deal with. Mai and his men killed the bats one by one with torches. These bats had big eyes, but in this dark cave, they were not very useful. They relied more on their sensitive sense of smell and hearing. The people in the hunting team were wearing thick leather shoes. Many of them were not used to wearing shoes, so they were forced to wear them before the mission. The bat feces in the cave had accumulated into a thick layer, and there were some small insects crawling in the bat feces. Puff! Lang Jie stabbed a crawling insect in half with his spear, and frowned. "This place stinks." Mai did not say anything. He took the torch and led his men deeper into the cave. While killing the bats, they also threw out some smoke grass. The other 4 hunting teams, like Mai and his men, had also entered the cave. They had to hurry up, in case of any unexpected changes. Everyone endured the stench in the cave and the smell of smoke grass, and quickly walked deeper into the cave. The inside of the cave was not flat. There were protruding rocks everywhere, and some of them were very sharp. If it were not for the light of the torches, they would not be able to move. Before, everyone had guessed that the crevices in the mountain were connected to the other bat caves. But soon, the 5 hunting teams all heard the voices of others. Sure enough, it is connected. Chapter 120. After walking out of the caves, the 5 hunting groups gathered together. In front of them, there was a very wide cave, and they couldn't see the top. And in front of them, it was like a dense fog. They thought that some bats would be forced to hide here by the smoke, but they didn't expect that there would be no bats in this wider area. Maybe they ran to other caves, but it shouldn't be that there were no bats here. Why? What was so special about this place? They couldn't figure it out. "How's it going on your side?" Mai asked the other hunting group leaders. "Not bad. Not many bats are left in the caves, and they are not hard to deal with. Same with our side. It seems that most of them are out." This was a good sign. "Something is coming," Cha suddenly said. There were more than 5 bat caves outside, and there were other caves that also led to this place. "Should we put out the torches?" "No, it's useless to put out the fire." "Wait, there are only 2 coming." Cheng made a gesture to the others. The sound of flapping wings was very clear in the quiet cave. Soon, everyone heard the sound of bats flying out from another cave. Whoosh! Whoosh! Although they couldn't see the faces of the 2 bats clearly, they could tell where they were by their hearing. Mai and the others threw the long spears at the 2 bats as soon as they came out. Puff! The 2 bats only uttered a few short syllables, and then fell to the ground. He asked the others to throw the smoke grass into the other caves, and then Ching stepped forward to check on the bats and the prey they caught. The 2 bats had been pierced like hedgehogs, and the cow they caught was also affected, with a few spears on its body. But the cow was still alive, just unconscious. Just like the other prey, the bats only made them unconscious, but didn't kill them directly. "Look at the direction they are flying, that way." Everyone looked at the direction Cheng was pointing at, but they couldn't see clearly even with the help of the torches. It was like a dense fog. Ah Cheng, will they? Cha looked at the foggy area in front of him and said. The prey caught by the bats was sent there, so were the 3 missing people in the hunting group sent there? Also, they came here to find out the reason for the bats' abnormal behavior. If they could figure it out, they could solve the problem from the root. Otherwise, they would have to risk being chased by the bats every time they needed to dig for the fire crystals. The reason for the bats' abnormal behavior was probably because of that. The 5 team leaders had once analyzed the situation and felt that the bats were probably preparing food for a leader. This phenomenon was common among many animals. This possibility was extremely high. If that was the case, they would do everything they could to kill that leader. Was the leader inside? If he killed their leader, would the bats disperse? Let's go and take a look. Be careful. Cheng warned everyone. As soon as they entered the area shrouded in fog, the torches in their hands became much smaller. The visibility was very low, and there was an extremely unpleasant smell in the surroundings, as if there was a heavy fog. Miasma? Xiao Xian was puzzled. The smell that assailed their nostrils made them feel dizzy. It was not the stench of the bat cave, but a smell that made them dizzy. Fortunately, the smell of the rattan grass eased this feeling. Putting a piece of the herb into their mouths, the bitter taste of the herb made everyone feel refreshed. The sound of wings flapping could be heard again. This time, there were more of them. After all, the effects of the smoke grass were limited. There were more than 10 bats flying in from other caves, all of them with prey in their hands. Mai and the others had planned to kill them by throwing their spears, but unexpectedly, the bats did not attack the hunting team. They did not even look at them. Instead, they grabbed their prey and flew into the area shrouded in fog. Somewhere in the fog came the sound of a heavy object falling to the ground. Not long after, those bats flew out of the fog and flew back into the cave. Their leader must be in there, Cheng said in a low voice. The deeper they went, the smaller the flames of the torches became, as if they could not burn any longer. Due to the influence of the thick fog, even Mai could only see within 10 meters with a torch, not to mention the others. This place, before Cha could finish his words, he kicked something under his feet. His nerves tightened all of a sudden, and he was ready to fight. But soon, he found that the object under his feet did not have any breath of life. Dead? Cha kicked the object under his feet. What Cha kicked was the dead body of a bat. And, this bat had been dead for a long time. Not only under Cha's feet, but also in the surrounding area shrouded in fog, there were bat skeletons everywhere. That was to say, there were bat corpses everywhere. In some places, there were even several layers of them. It was a little scary. As they went further, the bat corpses piled up thicker and thicker, like a small hill. Dead bats. All of them were dead bats. And many of them died in a miserable way. Their bodies were incomplete, and they were cruelly torn off before they died. No wonder those bats in the cave did not come here. This place was simply a bat graveyard. Every one of them is huge. They have been dead for a long time, Cheng said after looking at the few bats on the ground. Look at the traces left on their bodies. It seems that they killed each other. Why would they kill each other? I remember that in some groups of beasts, to choose a leader, they have to fight each other. Mai said. You mean, their leader is really here? Everyone suddenly became nervous. If these bats were all alive, with such a large number and body size, the 5 small leaders would not dare to bring people here directly. And with so many bats, what kind of ferocious beast would emerge as the winner? Even so, no one had any intention of retreating. In fact, when they were discussing with Mai and the others, Xiao Xian had proposed to go back to the tribe to find reinforcements. After all, the hunting had just begun, and they were all in the first stronghold. It would be faster for them to find reinforcements than the advance group. Moreover, if they went back to the tribe, they could find more reinforcements, which would be safer. However, Xiao Xian's proposal was rejected by the others. First, it was because of the competition between the two hunting groups. The 5 small leaders did not want the other hunting group to participate, and did not even want them to know the news. Second, the more people participated, the less each person would get. No one wanted that. Xiao Xian's idea was that where there is life, there is hope. But the others thought that for the fire crystals, they would rather die. That was what the tribesmen thought. At first, Mai had scolded Xiao Xian, "What is more important than your life?" But then everyone became extremely crazy. Xiao Xian underestimated this kind of craziness. So when the 5 small leaders were discussing the plan, he knew that these people were really going to risk their lives. As they continued to move forward, they could still hear the bats carrying prey in the air. None of the bats cared about the people in the mist. They were minding their own business. Bang! Another sound of prey falling to the ground. The place where the prey fell was very close to the people in the hunting group. "Wait!" Cheng whispered. "Breathing." Mai and the others also noticed it. There were a lot of breathing sounds around. Except for the warriors in the hunting group and the bats in the air, there were many other living creatures breathing. But every breath was very weak. Like climbing a mountain, they stepped on the thick dead bodies of the bats and continued to move forward. The fire of the torches was very weak. It had shrunk to 1/5 of its original size. Their vision was severely limited. Now they could only rely on their hearing to understand what was happening around them. Some junior totem warriors couldn't hold on any longer. They were almost at their limit. They were barely able to keep themselves from fainting. The effect of the vines and herbs was almost negligible. They couldn't resist the poisonous miasma in the fog. Those who can't bear it, stop. Those who can, keep going. Mai said. The other 4 squads did the same. Xiao Xian held the small fire crystal in his hand. The energy from the fire crystal helped him stay awake. He could bear it longer than the other junior totem warriors. It's the giant antler deer. Someone found a living creature on the ground. And the mountain antelope. And the wild boar. Living creatures began to appear around them one after another. But these animals were in a deep coma. In this mist, they couldn't wake up. Even if they woke up, they would faint again after taking a breath. Everyone in the hunting group was happy. The 3 missing people should be here, and they should be alive. On the hill like dead bodies of the bats, there were all kinds of animals. It was very difficult to find people in such a big place. "Xian, can you see?" Mai remembered that Xiao Xian had better night vision than ordinary people, so he asked. "I can't see far." "I'll try," Xiao Xian said. Xiao Xian used his special ability to see the objects around. But he also felt that there was a layer of fog. He couldn't see clearly. He could only see things within 50 meters. Even so, Xiao Xian was much better than the others. Because all he saw were skeletons, he could only tell what kind of animals they were from the skeletons. The others were alert to the surroundings. Xiao Xian was looking for the 3 human skeletons in the field of vision full of skeletons. Most of the junior totem warriors had stopped and couldn't follow them. Xiao Xian was the only young warrior who had followed them here. However, everyone thought that it was because Xiao Xian had learned from the shaman. That was why he could persist until now. The energy of the fire crystal in his hand was constantly being absorbed into his hand, so that the totem in his mind, which had been weakening, could continue to persist. But it was just barely. Xiao Xian thought that the energy of the fire crystal was probably running out, so the energy he absorbed now was not as much as before. The rhythmic sound of airflow was still there. But Xiao Xian couldn't find the source of the sound, and the others couldn't hear it. He glanced over a pile of skeletons, and finally fixed his eyes on a place that looked like a human. "Found it," Xiao Xian whispered. Cheng led the others to the place where Xiao Xian pointed. They really saw the people on the ground. The 3 people were not far away, and they were still breathing. Although they found the 3 people, Xiao Xian still felt uneasy. He always felt that there was something around. He lowered his head to look at the fire crystal in his hand. With just one glance, Xiao Xian felt his scalp go numb. His hair stood on end, and a chill seeped into every bone in his body. In Xiao Xian's hand, the red energy released by the burning fire crystal didn't all enter Xiao Xian's body as usual. Some of it floated behind Xiao Xian. Chapter 121. Only Xiao Xian could absorb the energy of the fire crystal in his hand, and no one else could. Xiao Xian had tried many times in the cave. No matter if it was a junior totem warrior or an intermediate totem warrior, it was the same. Therefore, Xiao Xian always thought that no one else could absorb the energy of the fire crystals in this way, including the 5 team leaders and Caesar. They didn't have any absorption reaction. But now, with his special vision, Xiao Xian saw that part of the red energy released by the burning fire crystal in his hand was floating behind him, and was not absorbed by him. Who was behind him? Uncle Mai. There seemed to be another team leader. Not just one, but several people. They had been on guard, so that Xiao Xian could focus on finding the missing people. But now, Xiao Xian turned around and looked at the place where the red energy line was floating. There was a floating object, about 3 meters high and shaped like a rhombus. Xiao Xian could not see the skeleton, but only a shining rhombus. Mai and the others had been paying attention to the surroundings, but they did not feel anything unusual. They were still wondering if the leader of the bats was not in the cave, or if he was weak and did not come out. Xiao Xian had found the missing 3 people, and they were still alive, which was really a good thing. But when they saw the expression on Xiao Xian's face when he turned around, Mai and the others suddenly felt a chill in their hearts. They turned around abruptly, but before they could see clearly, the long spear in Mai's hand had been thrown out. The long spear flew rapidly in the direction where Xiao Xian had been looking at. The long spear did not hit anything, and kept flying. After a while, it made a sound of hitting the stone wall, and then fell to the ground. They did not see anything. This was what Mai and the others saw after they turned around. Xiao Xian looked down at the hand holding the fire crystal. The red energy line had changed its direction, almost at the moment when Mai moved. The red energy lines emitted from the fire crystal floated upwards. Mai and the others looked at Xiao Xian. Seeing Xiao Xian raise his head again, they also raised their heads. This time, they did not move, but decided to observe first. Mai and the others still saw nothing above their heads. At least, they did not see anything within the range of their vision. But Xiao Xian did not. When he looked up, Xiao Xian's pupils suddenly shrank. When they had walked into the fog, Xiao Xian had also paid attention to the top, but he did not see anything, nor could he see the top. Now, they were stepping on a large number of bat corpses, climbing higher and higher. Xiao Xian could already see the top. There were many shiny rhombuses was hanging at the top. And the one he had seen was the closest one was closest to Xiao Xian. They still gave him the feeling they were still floating. Was this the reason why the bats is strange? If there were 2, there were too many. There was more than one, there was more. There were at least 100 of them. But there was still some distance to the top. Although it was not more than 50 meters, it was beyond the range of Mai and the others' vision in the fog. But the spear that Mai suddenly threw did not even touch the edge of the thing. Not only that, the few leaders couldn't even sense the existence of that thing. The gap between the 2 sides was too obvious. If those things attacked Xiao Xian and the others, Xiao Xian could only use 3 words to describe their situation: they were dead meat. The energy line of the fire crystal in his hand was still floating upwards. Looking at the red energy line floating upwards, Xiao Xian wanted to stop the burning of the fire crystal and put it away. But then, no one would know the position of the thing above them. Even Mai and the others could not sense it, let alone the others. Uncle Mai. Xiao Xian felt it was difficult to speak. Xian, what did you see? Mai had a bad feeling. Xiao Xian was about to answer, but suddenly there was a slight cracking sound above them. Mai and the others could also hear the sound. Their faces changed, and they shouted, "Be alert!" Cheng and the others, who were checking on the three missing people, quickly put up their guard. However, they could only hear the sound coming from above. They couldn't see or hear anything else. Crack, 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 the sound of a brittle shell cracking continued to ring out. Xiao Xian saw that the shining diamond cracked from the middle. The cracked shell broke and fell, revealing the creature inside. Xiao Xian could only see the skeleton. The skeleton was very similar to a bat. It was not big, but the pressure it brought was 100 times stronger than other bats. When the hunting group walked into the mist, there were still bats coming in from the outside and throwing them here. But somehow, not a single bat came here. The creature above them was still breaking out of its shell, and its wings stretched out silently. Its wings were not flapping, but it was almost floating there. After breaking out of its shell, it looked down at Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian felt a chill down his spine, and every strand of his hair seemed to be trembling. He could only see the skeleton and the sharp teeth in its mouth. He could not see its eyeballs, but he could still feel a pair of bloody eyes staring at him. It just glanced at him, and then turned its head to look at the other diamonds hanging above them. Those were its own kind. The next moment, Xiao Xian saw it open its mouth, and the bones in its nose and throat started to move in a strange way. It was very fast, but very regular. The hunters who were standing on top of the dead bats suddenly felt that their heads were about to explode. Their vision, hearing, and everything else disappeared at this moment. Lang Jie and the others fell down without saying a word. Mai and the other intermediate totem warriors were bleeding from their mouths, noses, and ears. Puff! After spitting out a mouthful of blood, Mai and the others fell down one after another. All the torches went out, and there was no light in the cave. Before they passed out, all they saw was the extinguished torches, and then endless darkness. They were all thinking about the same thing: why didn't they go back to the tribe for help? They were willing to die for the fire crystals, but it did not mean that they wanted the 5 teams to be wiped out. Who would bring the fire crystals back to the tribe? In that case, they would not only fail to make a contribution, but also become the sinners of the tribe. The only one who was still holding on was Xiao Xian. In fact, Xiao Xian was also dizzy. Even with his special vision, everything he saw was almost distorted. What helped him to hold on was the fire crystal in his hand. When the thing above broke out of its shell, it no longer absorbed the energy of the fire crystal. So now, all the energy of the fire crystal was supplied to Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian regretted it now. If he had not dug out the fire crystal, would these things not have happened? Or, he could have stopped them from going back to the tribe for help before taking action. No, even if the tribe used all their strength, they might not be able to defeat those things above. More than 100 of them, bang! 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 Loud explosions came from above. Xiao Xian struggled to hold on and looked up. Damn it! The one that broke out of its shell first was killing its own kind. The diamond-shaped, hanging on the top began to explode one by one. They did not break out of their shells, but really exploded into pieces. Some of the diamond-shaped actually had cracks before. Some were breaking out of their shells, but now, they were all being slaughtered. Those that were still diamond-shaped were directly exploded by the sound waves, and those that had begun to break out of their shells were torn apart and bitten to death one by one. The reason why a leader was called a leader was because it was the leader of the group. As for the leader, only one would be enough. Ignoring the broken limbs and incomplete corpses that fell one after another, Xiao Xian struggled to walk to Mai and the others. He stretched out his hand to feel them, and found that they still had a pulse. He immediately felt relieved. It was good that they were still alive. Unable to stand steadily, Xiao Xian sat down directly. Then, he watched as the one that broke out of its diamond-shaped shell first brutally killed its own kind one by one. One of them had its head bitten off and fell in front of Xiao Xian. Without a torch, Xiao Xian could not see with his normal vision. He could only see the skeleton that fell in front of him. He reached out to touch it. There was fur on its body, and its flesh was very hard. Its wings were like a shield. If they could survive, this group might become the top overlords of this forest. However, there was only one leader. The others were destined to be tragic and become stepping stones for the leader. No wonder the bats in the cave did not come over. Now that the guys above were fighting, the other bats did not dare to join in at all. They would die if they came. There were countless bat corpses piled up here. Every one of them was a strong member of their species when they were still alive. However, after a series of battles, only a few hundred of them survived. Then, after a special transformation that Xiao Xian could not understand, they transformed from powerful wild beasts into top-tier fearsome beasts. After that, the ones that were selected were the strongest in the group. For example, the one that was slaughtering its own kind. One step ahead, one step ahead. Although many of the bats above had not broken out of their shells, they still had some ability to move. They could not be killed all at once. The slaughter went on for about half an hour. Xiao Xian sat on the ground and watched for half an hour. He could not get up now and could not control his body's balance. He could only sit there for the time being. When the killing above was over, the sound waves finally stopped. Xiao Xian felt that his swollen head was much better, and his vision was no longer distorted. Feeling something strange, Xiao Xian looked up. Less than half a meter away from him, a skeleton stood there silently. Xiao Xian could even clearly smell the blood on it. Xiao Xian and the bat looked at each other for a few seconds. When Xiao Xian was wondering if the bat had finished slaughtering its own kind and was going to kill someone, he saw the bat leader bite the headless corpse that fell there. Soon, it let go, looked elsewhere, and walked over. It also had folded wings and strong hind legs, but when it walked, it was much lighter than the other bats. Even in front of Xiao Xian could barely hear the sound of it walking. The bat leader walked along the battlefield. Everywhere it went, it would bite its own kind that it had killed, and the living things that the other bats had sent over. Strangely, it avoided the people in the hunting group. When the bat leader walked away, Xiao Xian reached out to touch the headless skeleton. It was shriveled. It did not look big, but its appetite was amazing, and it ate very fast. The other bats had to lick it. The bat leader seemed to bite it very casually, but soon it let go. However, the prey that was bitten had turned from a coma to a dead one, and its body had become shriveled. Almost all the food sent by the bats in the cave and in the stone crevices had been bitten, except for the people in the hunting group. Looking at it eating, Xiao Xian had a feeling that the last winner of the battle was disdaining the food it had just eaten. You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.